Order. We start with questions. Secretary of State for Scotland, Charlie Dewhurst.
Question number 1, Mr. Speaker.
Well done.
Minister, welcome.
With your permission, Mr. Speaker, I will answer questions 1 and 6 together. This government appreciates the role of farmers and everyone involved in our agricultural sector, and I've personally been delighted to meet with representatives of NFUS and other stakeholders on numerous occasions. On each, I have reiterated that the government wants to strike a fair balance between supporting farmers and fixing our public finances and the public services on which our rural communities rely. As both honourable members will be aware, the vast majority of farmers will not be affected at all. They will be able to pass the family farm down to their children, just as previous generations have always done. Only the richest estates will be asked to pay, not small family farms. And that is a policy that we on this side of the House are proud to support.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And may I welcome the new ministerial team to the dispatch box, and particularly the Secretary of State back after nearly 20 years, Secretary of State for Scotland. Farmers watching that response will be thinking, frankly, what a load of tosh. So can I ask specifically to both the Secretary of State and the Minister, what representations have you made on behalf of farmers in Scotland to the Chancellor ahead of the budget?
Mr. Speaker, as I mentioned, we are in regular dialogue with farming stakeholders and we regularly consider the evidence that is presented to us. The thing that I would stress, however, is whilst we will always give evidence due consideration, indeed the Prime Minister said so from this very dispatch box last week at Prime Minister's questions, the thing from which we will not deviate is our policy objective, which is both to raise revenue but to introduce greater fairness to our tax system, and that's exactly what this change does.
Thanks, Stevenson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's very clear that Scottish Labour and this government do not care and do not understand our rural communities. If we have no farmers, then there is no food. Will he listen, will she listen to the voices of rural Scots, of NFU Scotland and communities up and down this country and ask the Chancellor to rethink this ruinous inheritance tax reform?
Mr. Speaker, I myself am a representative of rural Scots, as indeed is the Secretary of State for Scotland, who is meeting farmer representatives in his constituency this very week. We are in ongoing dialogue with our constituents and with farming stakeholders, but I reiterate what we say in the course of those dialogues is we must introduce greater fairness to the system, and 3/4 of farmers will not be impacted whatsoever.
Katrina Murray.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There are many factors that make family farms viable, including the ability to work the land and carry out what is a very physically demanding job. Does the Minister agree with me that tackling the fundamental problems in our NHS and the growing waiting lists in Scotland must be a priority when balancing competing pressures, given poor access to health care disproportionately affects those working in Scotland's farming and rural constituencies?
Mr. Speaker, I couldn't agree with my honourable friend more. Since the election, the UK Government's Plan for Change has delivered an extra £5.2 billion to the Scottish Government, funding that can be used to improve the performance of devolved public services like the NHS. In June, the Spending Review announced an additional £9.1 billion in funding for the Scottish Government. So rural communities like my own are right to ask when they will see improvements in their access to healthcare. I would also like to take the opportunity to commend charities like the Farm Safety Foundation and their brilliant Yellow Wellies initiative for the work that they do to support the mental and physical health of farmers and all of our rural communities.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The proposed changes to agricultural property relief in Scotland ensure that by still providing full relief for the first £1 million of assets, farmers continue to benefit from government support far beyond that which is available to other assets. Given that 7% of claimants, 117 claimants, received 2/5 of all agricultural property relief at the cost of some £219 million, does the Minister agree that this government's reforms are essential for fairness, but also to help fund vital public services in rural Scotland?
Our reforms mean that the majority, almost 3/4 of those claiming relief, will not be affected. Only the richest estates will be asked to pay more. This is a fair approach that balances fixing our public finances while still maintaining support for small family farms and businesses.
Can I just say, it says Scotland in the title. It's not linked to Northern Ireland. Andrew Bower, Shadow Secretary of State.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the agricultural sector is woven into the fabric of communities across Scotland. It employs thousands and contributes millions annually to the economy, but farmers across Scotland have been left in fear. Fear for their families' future and their way of life because of this government wanting to tax them out of existence. Yep. Now, despite the very clear messages from the farming community supported by the NFUS, this government is ploughing on regardless, completely ignoring the damage that they are doing. But that's just it, Mr. Speaker. The truth is they don't understand, and worse, because they don't vote Labour, they don't care, do they?
Yep. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'll reiterate again, in case the Shadow Secretary of State didn't hear me. Both myself and the Secretary of State represent semi-rural and farming constituencies. We are in ongoing dialogue with constituents. We absolutely understand the pressures that they face, which is why we have said that we will support family farms and that only the very richest will be affected. Our constituents rely on public services and require investment in those public services, and that's exactly what this tax change was designed to do. Introduce fairness but also raise revenue that will benefit all of our communities, including rural Scots.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, Archibald Young, a foundry in my constituency, manufactures components that are vital to our national security, yet it now faces a devastating blow from Labour's tax changes. Food production too, as we're hearing, another cornerstone of national security, will be decimated by these measures. This goes to the heart of protecting our country. Does the Minister agree that Scottish businesses, which are essential to national security, must be safeguarded? And will the Minister commit to meeting with me and others with similar concerns to discuss this?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'd be delighted to meet with the Honourable Lady and welcome to your new position in this House. Food security is indeed national security. National security is the #1 priority of this government. We are trying to safeguard it in a number of ways, including through our commitment to food security and indeed energy security, but I'd be delighted to discuss this with her further.
Dr Ben Spence.
Question number 2, please, Mr. Speaker.
Welcome.
Mr. Speaker, oil and gas from the North Sea will remain part of our energy system for decades to come. As a government, we are strengthening our energy security, and as part of that effort, we are investing in homegrown clean power energy through GB Energy. We are committed to a fair and orderly transition. Next week, I'll be in Aberdeen to meet with energy companies from across the North East.
Dr Ben Spencer.
Thank you. We all know the government's energy policy is unsustainable. It's even reported that the Department for Energy Security and Net Zero is looking at authorising tiebacks to access new oil and gas wells using existing infrastructure in the North Sea. So will he acknowledge today that if we want to increase energy security and reduce energy prices for households and businesses, we must expand the use of energy resources available to us, including North Sea oil and gas?
Mr. Speaker, as I sought to reflect in the first answer, oil and gas will be a central part of our energy mix in the United Kingdom for decades to come. But I think it's also right to recognise that there is a transition that needs to be managed, and there was an abject failure by the previous government to manage that transition. That's why we saw tens of thousands of jobs going in the North Sea without the level of investment that we're now seeing from GB Energy to manage that transition effectively.
Total crime.
Mr. Speaker, does the Minister agree with me that they've got a cheek? 77,000 jobs drifted out of the North Sea under that government, and they didn't lift a finger to do it. This government, along with the Scottish government, invested £18 million in a transition fund to help oil and gas workers move into energy jobs. Now, that will be an uneven transition, but an inevitable one. But does he agree with me that that's what you get when you have a government with an industrial strategy that puts workers first?
Mr. Speaker, I find myself in agreement with my honourable friend from the Western Isles. The North Sea has provided decades. The North Sea has provided decades of good jobs, not just for people from the Western Isles and across Scotland, but indeed the whole of the United Kingdom. The last Conservative government didn't believe in an industrial strategy. It's as basic as that. It's not just a difference of policy, it's a difference of philosophy. We believe in open markets and the active state. That's why we've set up GB Energy, that's why there's a transition fund, and that's why you can rely on Labour.
Andrew Bowie, Shadow Secretary of State.
Thank you very much. Mr. Speaker, and I'll take this opportunity to welcome the Secretary of State back to the dispatch box as Secretary of State for Scotland after his sabbatical over the last 20 or so years. His colleague, the Energy Secretary's messianic zeal to see the destruction of our oil and gas industry is having real-life consequences. Scottish workers are being made unemployed in their thousands, while this government bans the drilling and exploration of oil and gas in British waters and imports more gas from Norway, who are getting it from the very same sea. We are prevented from exploiting ourselves. I mean, come on, Secretary of State, it is all a little unhinged, isn't it?
Yes. Secretary of State.
Mr. Speaker, where to begin with a government that has, on one hand, invested in GB Energy, has a transition fund, up against an opposition who abjectly failed in their responsibilities towards the North Sea? We just heard from our right honourable friend, 77,000 jobs lost. There's a record that you own, and we'll continue to point it out.
Secretary of State, the Secretary of State for Energy is not the Messiah. Week after week, I come to this chamber to ask energy ministers and Scotland Office ministers why they are content to sacrifice one of this country's greatest national assets and allow highly skilled workers to go on the scrap heap or go overseas. As Scotland's man at the cabinet table, he knows it is his job to speak up for those people who are losing their jobs today, not to defend the Secretary of State for Energy. So will he explain that to the people of Aberdeen when he visits next week?
Mr. Speaker, I gently remind the Shadow Secretary of State there's a difference between abuse and argument. And in relation to substantive arguments, of course I'm happy to be Scotland's voice at the Cabinet table. That's why only next week I will be meeting with a range of energy companies based in Aberdeen, listening directly to them. That dialogue has already started, but I think we can do better than that.
Douglas McAllister.
Question number 3, please, Mr. Speaker.
With your permission, Mr. Speaker, I will answer questions 3 and 12 together. The Scotland Office is backing Scotland's communities with our £292 million Pride in Place investment. This plan will support grassroots movements that will restore local people's power, boost national pride and help people get on in life. It will revitalise our high streets, create jobs and improve safety and security. But more than that, Mr. Speaker, it will give expression to this government's core belief that communities are powerful and that in every corner of our country you will find millions and millions of so-called ordinary people doing their best and doing their bit to transform the places they love for the people they love.
Douglas McAllister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The UK Government is investing more than £41 million of funding in my constituency, including the recently announced Pride in Place Award. This will unlock the potential of my Western Bartonshire constituency, matching the level of ambition I have to regenerate our town centres and communities in Western Bartonshire and make them fit for the future. Does the Secretary of State agree with me that this is in stark contrast to the SNP who have given up in our communities right across Scotland and in Western Bartonshire?
Minister.
Well, first of all, I'd like to commend my honourable friend for his ambition for his seat and also his sterling advocacy for it. He's right that this funding will help revitalise our high streets, create jobs and improve safety and security in Scotland. He's also right that the SNP is desperately out of touch with their squabbling over independence, while services across Scotland are at breaking point.
Nash.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Since the election last year, when Labour came to power, our constituents in Scotland have seen our friends in England and Wales see real improvements in their communities and public services, while our constituents look on and wonder what the SNP government are squandering Scotland's share on. Does the Minister agree with me that key to the success of the Pride in Place funding and projects, including the £41.5 million coming to Lanarkshire, is that we are putting power directly in the hands of people to make decisions about investments in their own communities?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend is right that both her constituents and mine look with some envy to the other side of the border, where millions of extra NHS appointments have been secured, whilst waiting lists in Scotland go up and up. Local communities are at the heart of Scottish life, which is why we're giving them control over hundreds of millions of pounds of investment to revitalise their high streets, take ownership of important local assets and build thriving and prosperous places to work, live and visit.
Rick Cross.
Mr. Speaker, the Pride in Place initiative from the government, they're equivalent to levelling up, should be great and it should be felt across Scotland, but unfortunately we're actually feeling the negative, the opposite in North East Scotland because of their energy policies. The regeneration which our high streets are going to need after a decade of decline that we may see in the sector, whether that's from the SNP's policies or from Labour policies, will be disastrous. Yes. How will the government act to ensure that our high streets in North East Scotland will not be decimated even further?
Mr Speaker, I will remind the Honourable Lady that, of course, her constituents benefit from a city and region growth deal, so there is investment going into her place. But if she has complaints about the decline of her constituency, I suggest she looks at her other colleagues on the benches opposite and holds them accountable for 14 years of catastrophic economic mismanagement by the Conservatives.
Wishart.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. As long as I get any opportunity, I'm just going to continue to ask, why is Perth and Kinross not getting 1 penny from this current allocation? Why is Perth and Kinross never had 1 single penny from any government allocation? Why did this Labour government take away £5 million that we finally got from the Conservatives? And lastly, when is Perth and Kinross going to get its fair share?
Minister.
Mr Speaker, these allocations under the Pride in Place programme have been based on data, evidence-led and based on a formula that is progressive and putting money into the pockets of those who need it most. If he's worried about where money in Perth and Kinross has gone, I suggest he ask the First Minister of Scotland from his own party, who's received over £5 billion, and his constituents, like mine, will be asking, where's the money gone, John?
Angus MacDonald.
Question number 4, please.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. This government is taking action to support vulnerable families this winter, including expanding the Warm Home Discount Scheme, which means more than 500,000 households now benefit from this £150 payment. That's 1 in 5 Scottish households.
He just said he won't.
Angus MacDonald.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Would the Minister acknowledge the unfairness that my constituents in Skye, and indeed all across rural Scotland and rural Great Britain, who are paying 4 times as much to heat their houses using locally generated renewable electricity, often while looking at wind turbines outside their window, compared to those in cities who heat their houses using carbon imported gas, largely due to the fact that the environmental tariffs are wrongly on the renewables and not on the carbon fuel gas?
So, Mr Speaker, communities can feel tangible benefits from community benefits which are largely voluntary at the moment. I think he makes an important point, and that's why this government is considering mandating the provision of community benefit funds for low-carbon energy infrastructure across the United Kingdom, and we will have more to say in our plans when they're set out later this year.
Maureen Burt.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. There are estimated to be over 70,000 households in Glasgow living in fuel poverty. The UK Government's extension to the Warm Homes discount will mean many of these families receive money off their energy bills. Could the Secretary of State outline how people can access this support?
Well, Mr Speaker, the good news is that those in receipt of pension credit that tops them up to a minimum weekly income will continue to receive this discount automatically. The scheme is opening again this month. Anyone who thinks they may be eligible, whether in Glasgow or elsewhere across Scotland, should contact their energy supplier.
Rankin.
Number 5, please, sir. With permission, Mr Speaker, I'll answer questions 5 and 11 together. I was elected on a very clear manifesto which made clear that this UK Labour government does not support independence or another referendum. If, after 18 years, the SNP are not prepared to run on their record, it begs the question, what kind of record have they left after 18 years in power? Behind the smokescreen they try to create by talking about independence, we know the reality. 1 in 6 of us on waiting lists, rising violence and falling standards in our schools in Scotland. Frankly, Scotland deserves better.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I thank the Secretary of State for his unequivocal rejection of separatism. He will always find on this side of the House fellow colleagues that treasure this United Kingdom and will want to shout about the most successful alliance in political history. Can I ask specifically what steps he can take to prevent more taxpayers' cash being squandered as the SNP pursue their doomed dream.
Well, Mr. Speaker, as my honourable friend made clear, we've committed £5.2 billion to the Scottish Government this year, the largest settlement in the 25 years of devolution. There's a very basic question that as Scots we are asking: where's the money gone, John? The reality is our services are getting worse, not better. We see industrial level waste from the SNP, and that's why it's time for a new direction.
Brendan O'Hara.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and may I also welcome the Secretary of State to his place, although it seems his appointment hasn't been universally welcomed. Indeed, I hear that the Daily Record feared an asterisk shortage, having asked his Labour colleagues for their opinion, with one particularly caustic comrade saying, "If I had £1 for everyone that liked him, I'd have 50 pence." But rest assured, his appointment was welcomed with open arms on these benches. And I have to admit, Mr. Speaker, for having a grudging admiration for him, for someone who cares not about the opinion of other people, but with Labour tanking in the polls and independents the majority view in this...
Mr O'Hara, I think it's meant to be a question, not a statement. I'm sure you might catch me eye.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the quality of the SNP's contributions don't seem to have improved since 2007. And neither has their argument, because in the face of failing schools, failing hospitals, the inability to build ferries in his own constituency, what do we see? Once again, dreary documents about independence. The reality is they have let Scotland down. Scotland deserves better, and that's why we're up for the fight in May.
Mr. Speaker, the SNP's renewed chatter on independence is understandable because they want to distract from their abysmal record of running down our public services. But given that their plans for defence of an independent Scotland include giving up the nuclear deterrent and replacing it with little more than a Scottish Navy comprising the Waverley and the Vital Spark, does the Minister agree that Vladimir Putin will be rubbing his hands with glee at their latest outbursts?
Mr. Speaker, I'm a great fan of both Parahandy, the Vital Spark and the Waverley, but I wouldn't want to offer that in the face of Vladimir Putin's defence or approach to Euro-Atlantic security. The reality is we have student gesture politics from the Scottish National Party. I met with the major defence companies in Greenock last Friday, and they were very clear that we are foregoing industrial opportunities now. There is a real cost to the incompetence and student naivety of the Scottish National Party.
Elaine Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Businesses in my constituency of Ayrcarrick and Cumnock, and indeed across Scotland, need stability, certainty and opportunity. Does my right honourable friend agree that this is what they are getting from a Labour government, which stands in stark contrast to the instability and uncertainty of the SNP and their obsession with independence?
Well, Mr. Speaker, returning to the dispatch box as Secretary of State for Scotland, what's striking is the SNP's answers are no better than they were in 2017, 2014 or 2021. I simply ask, what is their policy on a Scottish currency? What is their policy on foreign reserves? What is their position on a Scottish pension? They're no better answering these questions now than they were 20 years ago.
Stephen Gettins.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, can I join other certainly opposition members of Parliament in welcoming the Secretary of State to his place, and I'll wish him well in that job. Mr. Speaker, the Member of Parliament for Argyll and Bute isn't the only one with a quote that might be of interest to the Secretary of State. I've got another. There's one here. Can he tell us who said this? If there's a majority, an SNP majority, it's got to be looked at in Westminster. Who said that?
Secretary of State.
Mr. Speaker, I sense it might be myself, and we would take seriously any SNP majority. But if they were to be returned to office, I hope they would do better than they've done over the last 18 years. But I can assure you, on this side of the House, we're not anticipating defeat, we're working for victory.
Stephen Gettins.
Mr. Speaker, well, this might get just a little bit awkward. It wasn't the Secretary of State, although I do welcome his contribution to this. It was actually his boss, the leader of the Labour Party, the current Prime Minister, who's about to turn up. Very awkward indeed. There he is. Now, is he going to stick to that commitment, or are we going to see Labour break yet another promise?
Mr. Speaker, not least because my boss has just turned up. I always agree with my boss. But the reality is this: we are clear and unequivocal that what we don't want is the breakup of the United Kingdom. As Scots, we made our choice in 2014, and that was a better future within the United Kingdom.
Seven, sir.
This government is working tirelessly to reduce the cost of living in Scotland. We've introduced the national living wage, we've delivered a generational upgrade to workers' rights and helped the Bank of England cut interest rates 5 times, putting money in people's pockets across Scotland. Furthermore, thanks to our stewardship, the IMF forecasts the UK to be the second fastest growing G7 economy this year.
Scotland is the only part of the United Kingdom where child poverty is falling, and it's also the only part of Great Britain with a non-Labour government. I'm sure the Minister will agree with me the rest of the UK deserves better. And so will she be calling on the Chancellor to scrap the 2-child cap in the upcoming budget?
Mr. Speaker, there is a child poverty strategy on the way. It will be released in due course, and I can underscore our commitment to fighting child poverty with every breath that we have. It's what Labour governments have always done. It's what Labour government will do too.
Brent Leishman.
Mr. Speaker, this weekend thousands of people will march in Edinburgh to say that Scotland demands better, and we are right to, because the Poverty Alliance say that 1 in 6 adults, around 1.2 million people, are living in food insecurity. What is the Scotland Office and wider Labour government doing to end food insecurity for Scots?
Mr. Speaker, our commitment to ending poverty is clear. We have had a clear focus on living standards. We have improved the fact that work now is increasingly paying, and we're focusing on making sure that none of Scotland's children are subject to the poverty he so vividly describes.
Before we come to Prime Minister's questions, I'm sure the whole House will know that this weekend the Rugby League Ashes returns for the first time since 2003. I'd like to place on record my very best wishes to the England team, which will make the major rumble in London this weekend. It's the first of 3 matches against Australia. We now come to Ross Savage.
Question number 1.
Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On Sunday, we unveiled Labour's plan to recruit hundreds of thousands of workers into clean energy, creating quality, well-paid jobs in every quarter of the United Kingdom. On Monday, we announced the new V-level qualification to make sure every young person has the skills to realise their potential. On Tuesday, our first ever regional investment summit in Birmingham secured £10 billion in investment, and today we're announcing tough new penalties to end the scandal of pollution in our rivers and seas. Mr. Speaker, that's national renewal with a Labour government. Mr. Speaker, yesterday I met Claire Throssell, who is here with us in the gallery today. Her 2 young sons, Paul and Jack, were murdered 11 years ago this week by her abusive ex-husband after a family court ordered he should have unsupervised contact with them. Claire's bravery and her campaign is humbling, and today I'm pleased we can announce that we will repeal the presumption of parental involvement, putting children's safety first. This morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others, Mr. Speaker, in addition to my duties in this House. I shall have further such meetings later today.
Dr. Ross Savage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I would like to associate myself with the Prime Minister's sympathies extended towards Claire and commend her on her bravery. Mr. Speaker, I regret to inform the House that yesterday there was a very, very serious breach of national security when my PMQ was photographed heading into number 10 through a transparent folder. However, the nation can rest easy. On this occasion, no state secrets were revealed. However, it does make me wonder whether this government can be trusted with a digital ID scheme that is mandatory in all but name. Can the Prime Minister... I like to keep the Prime Minister on his toes. Will the Prime Minister reverse this misguided scheme, or will he persist with a plan that makes all of our personal data vulnerable to hacks and attacks?
Prime Minister.
Well, I thank you for that question. The whole point of digital ID, of course, is that you can't see it. So that should at least deal with the first of her concerns. Look, it is important that we make access to services, public services, as easy as possible for people. And we all know the difficulties that so many people have accessing services, and digital ID has been shown in other countries to help. I do think this is an important step forward. I also think it's very important as part of our plan to tackle those who are entering our country illegally.
Jane Kirkham.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Households in Cornwall in temporary accommodation have increased by 265% in 5 years. So I'm delighted that this Labour government is investing £39 million into social and affordable housing. Yeah. In Cornwall, we're developing a strategy to provide housing at sites like Pydar in my constituency, which need support from Homes England. Will the Prime Minister arrange for us to meet the Housing Minister at our Homes Cornwall launch next month to accelerate discussions on a strategic partnership for Cornwall so we can build the right homes in the right places for local people?
Prime Minister.
Well, I know the Housing Minister would be delighted to meet my honourable friend to help unlock new homes for her constituents. We are working closely with local authorities through our small sites aggregator to build new affordable homes on brownfield sites. My goal, Mr. Speaker, is to restore the dream of home and ownership, which was stolen by the government, by the opposition when they were in government. Thank you.
Leader of the Opposition, Kemi Beno.
Mr. Speaker, first of all, can I pay tribute to the former Conservative MP Oliver Colville, who has very sadly passed away after a long illness. Colleagues will remember him for his love of cricket and, of course, hedgehogs. He will be very much missed. Mr. Speaker, 4 victims on the Rape Gang Survivors Panel have resigned. And they've resigned because they've lost all confidence in the government's inquiry. So I'm giving my first question to one of them, to Fiona. She said, being dismissed and contradicted by a minister when you're telling the truth takes you right back to that feeling of not being believed all over again. Fiona's question is simple. What's the point in speaking up if we're just going to be called liars?
Prime Minister.
Can I thank her for raising that on behalf of Fiona, and let me give Fiona and the House my answer, Mr. Speaker, because the grooming scandal was one of the worst scandals of our time. Women and girls were abused and exploited by predatory gangs of men, and survivors have been ignored for many years, including by the state that, of course, is supposed to protect them. My vow to Fiona and them is that this national inquiry will change that. I do acknowledge that in recent days some members, including Fiona, have decided to step away from the panel. I say this, Mr. Speaker, should they wish to return, the door will always be open. But even if they do not, we owe it to them and to Fiona and to the country to answer the concerns that they have raised. The inquiry is not and will never be watered down. Its scope will not change. It will examine the ethnicity and religion of the offenders, and we will find the right person to chair the inquiry. I can tell the House today, Mr. Speaker, that Dame Louise Casey will now support the work of the inquiry, and it will get to the truth. Injustice will have no place to hide.
Mr. Speaker, I doubt she'll be satisfied with that answer. He says that they could return to the panel if they wish to. Why would they do that? The government has been engaged in a briefing war against survivors. Elizabeth. Oh, really? They say shame? Why don't they listen to what Elizabeth had to say? Why don't they listen to what Elizabeth had to say? Elizabeth, who was abused in Rotherham from the age of 14, had this to say, and I quote, "The government has created a toxic environment for survivors." They were looking for answers from the Prime Minister, and what they've heard is Labour MPs saying shame at their words. Yesterday, Mr. Speaker, the Safeguarding Minister said Elizabeth was wrong. Who should we believe? The Prime Minister's Safeguarding Minister or Elizabeth?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, let me put on record my respect for all of the survivors who've been through the most awful ordeals. And I want to thank those that have been involved so far for the work in the process. What we're trying to do is to get this right and have an inquiry with survivors at the heart. As the Safeguarding Minister told the House yesterday, that's obviously not easy. They've all come with difficult experiences. There are a wide range of views, understandably, and every survivor does bring their own painful experience to this. The survivors met the prospective chairs this week, and we want to have them to have the chance to engage. I want survivors to be at the heart of this. I want an inquiry that can get to the truth. These are the hard yards, I accept that, but I want to press on and get this right.
Mr. Speaker, he says that he wants survivors to be at the heart of this, but in his first PMQs this year, he said we did not need a national inquiry. And when he did, all of these MPs cheered. They were nodding their heads, including the Safeguarding Minister. They voted against the national inquiry 3 times. Yes, they did. Yes, they did. They voted against the national inquiry. They voted against the national inquiry 3 times, so the victims don't believe them. They can say no as much as they like. It is on the record. They don't like it, but it's true. Now, one of the victims has quit. Contrary to what the Prime Minister's just said and what the Home Secretary wrote this morning, they believe that the inquiry will downplay the racial and religious motivations behind their abuse. Aren't the victims right when they call it a cover-up?
Prime Minister.
Well, let me reassure the victims and the House that the scope of the inquiry will not be diluted, and we won't shy away from cultural or religious issues. And, Mr. Speaker, it was me that commissioned Baroness Casey in the first place, who gave me her recommendation in relation to a national inquiry, and we have, in the 4 months since then, finalised the panel and trying to get the leadership of this inquiry right, with survivors at the heart. Mr. Speaker, in that period, we have also reopened 1,200 historic closed cases. I have long argued, Mr. Speaker, that the criminal route where it can be pursued is the right route for perpetrators. We've introduced mandatory reporting of child sex abuse. I happen to think that is a vital safeguard. I've been campaigning for that for over a decade. I asked the last government to introduce it, and that fell on deaf ears. And that mandatory reporting of child sex abuse is something each and every one of them voted against earlier this year. And we've given victims and survivors the power to seek an independent review of their cases. But, Mr. Speaker, in relation to this inquiry, I want to go as fast as we can to get the justice that is deserved. I want to ensure survivors are involved in that, and we're balancing the two to get this right, and I'll continue to do so.
Mr. Speaker, he's talking about mandatory reporting. I will remind him what Fiona asked. What is the point if the victims aren't going to be believed? What would be the point of mandatory reporting? All of this is happening now. All he's saying is because 4 of those victims resigned from the survivors panel. If they hadn't done that, they would have continued with the watering down, which we all know that they were carrying out. So, yes, the victims are right to be worried. He also talked about looking for a chair. It has been 10 months since we first called for a national inquiry. 10 months. It is shocking that they still do not have a chair. One of the final 2 candidates, Mr. Speaker, has pulled out, leaving a former police officer that the victims don't want. What they do want is a judge. They deserve a judge. So, Mr. Speaker, we are talking about the industrial-scale rape of women and girls. Unlike most of the inquiries going on, why is it that this inquiry doesn't deserve a judge?
Prime Minister.
Can I answer that? It's a serious point, Mr. Speaker, because whether it should be judge-led was looked at by Louise Casey, and she decided against that for a reason, and her reasons were twofold. I'll spell them out. The first was the speed with which we could do this, and it would have been... They asked the question, and the first was the speed with which we could do this. The second is really important, and that is that at the same time as the inquiry, I was absolutely determined that criminal investigations would go on at the same time. One of the problems that judge-led inquiries run into, I've seen and experienced this myself, is that they're often held back until the end of the criminal investigations. And I was determined that we'd be able to run the two together. And it's because of that, Mr. Speaker, that we've been able to reopen 1,200 historic cases at the same time. And Mr. Speaker, she asks, what's the point of mandatory reporting that she voted against? I don't think she understands how it works. This, Mr. Speaker, is mandatory reporting of those that have had allegations made to them, and there's clear enough evidence they've then not passed that on. That is a fundamental problem in the system. That is why we've changed the law. They should hang their heads in shame for having voted against that vital protection.
What he should hang his head in shame in is calling this a far-right bandwagon when we first raised this issue. The deputy leader, the future deputy leader, we all know who's going to win, called this a dog whistle. What we need to think about right now, Mr. Speaker, is the victims. It is the survivors. I spoke to one of them yesterday. Let's remember, these are victims who waived their anonymity, an incredibly difficult thing to do. And they believe that the safeguarding minister has lied to them and about them. One of the survivors has said, and I quote, "Jess Phillips needs to be removed because I don't think her conduct during this has been acceptable for the position that she holds." Those aren't my words. Those are the words of a survivor. It is a shame that Labour MPs are drowning that out. The member for Birmingham Yardley has clearly lost the confidence of the victims. Does she still have the confidence of the Prime Minister?
Can I just say, Prime Minister, even if we are quoting somebody else, we shouldn't quote it because it's a direct allegation against a member of this House. So I'm sure that that's not what was intended, Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I respect the views of all the survivors, and there are different views. I accept that. But the safeguarding minister, I think, has probably more experience than any other person in this House in dealing with violence against women and girls. Alongside her will be Louise Casey. These two individuals, Mr. Speaker, have spent decades standing up for those who have been abused and sexually exploited. And I absolutely think they're the right people to take this forward.
Mr. Speaker, she doesn't have more experience than the survivors. The fact is, just a few weeks ago, he was standing there telling us he had full confidence in the best friend of a convicted paedophile. So it is no surprise that people have no confidence in what he is saying. The victims have said that she should be sacked. We on this side of the House believe that she should be sacked because this is about Labour failure. Labour never wanted this inquiry. We demanded it. It has been Labour-run councils, Trafford, Bradford, Blackpool, that tried to suppress the truth. It is Labour ministers attacking the victims. We're standing up for them. And how is it, Mr. Speaker, how is it that whether it is rape or Chinese espionage, when he's in a position to do something about it, it's always someone else's fault?
Mr. Speaker, my priorities are listening to and standing up for the survivors. That's why we're doing the work on the inquiry. That's why we've reopened the criminal cases, why we brought in mandatory reporting. But I would gently remind them they had 14 years in office. They barely mentioned this issue. And where there were inquiries, they failed to act on them. We have done more in the time we've been in office than they did in 14 long years.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mental ill health affects 1 in 4 of us.
it costs this country up to £300 billion a year. So will the Prime Minister join me in thanking the staff at McGill Health Park who do a brilliant job in looking after those suffering from mental ill health? And will he wish them well with their plans to set up a world-leading research and innovation centre which will make an enormous contribution towards this government's stated aim of giving mental and physical health care equal priority?
Prime Minister.
Well, of course I join in thanking the staff at McGill Health Park. Mr Speaker, we are investing £15.6 billion to bring down mental health waiting lists, vital in continuing to drive down inactivity and helping people to get the care that they need. In the upcoming multi-year capital budgets, we will enable NHS Trust to accelerate decisions on local priorities, and that could include developments like the Mental Health Digital Research Centre that he champions.
Leader of the Liberal Democrats, Sir Ed Davey.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Can I agree with the Prime Minister about the words he said about Claire Frossell? And agree with him that it's right that we change the law, and I hope it's named after her sons, Jack and Paul. Mr Speaker, given the revelations about Royal Lodge, does the Prime Minister agree that this House needs to properly scrutinise the Crown Estate to ensure taxpayers' interests are protected? The Chancellor herself has said that the current arrangements are wrong, so will the Prime Minister support a select committee inquiry so all those involved can be called for evidence, including the current occupant?
Prime Minister.
Well, it's important in relation to all properties, Crown properties, that there is proper scrutiny. I certainly support that.
Sir Ed Davey.
Well, Mr Speaker, I hope the House can look at this properly and all people can be summoned to the relevant committee. But turning to the economy now, Mr Speaker, I know members opposite are relieved. They are finally allowed to say the Conservatives' Brexit deal is a disaster. But, Mr Speaker, that can't just be a political ruse to attack the honourable member for Clacton, however much he deserves it. Or even worse, Mr Speaker, given we still have the highest inflation in the G7, it mustn't be a smokescreen to raise taxes on ordinary people. Mr Speaker, it must be a call to action. So will the Prime Minister act now to repair the Brexit damage by negotiating a new UK-EU customs union to boost Britain's trade and grow our economy?
No, I don't think that's the way forward. What we've done is to have a much closer relationship with the EU, recognising the damage done by the flawed Brexit deal that the party opposite negotiated. We've also struck deals with India and with the US, record investment into this country, and the fastest growing economy in the G7 in the first half of this year.
Daniel Francis.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. This summer, I visited every road across the Bexley and Crayford constituency to reporting potholes to ensure the £895,000 given by this Labour government to the Conservative Control Council in the London Borough of Bexley is spent. However, the Conservative Cabinet member responsible for roads on the council wrote to our local newspaper asking that I stop reporting potholes because it was causing work for the council. Will the Prime Minister join with me in urging my Conservative council to get on and spend that money to make roads like May Place Road East safe to drive on?
So this is a local Conservative council telling him not to point out potholes in case they have to fill them. That's outrageous, just like the record of the last 14 years. Mr Speaker, we know how problematic, dangerous and costly potholes are to drivers. That's why we've delivered record investment to maintain our roads and fix potholes. That's £1.6 billion, Mr Speaker. That money has been given to councils, but it comes with strings. So my message to reinforce this is clear to the council. Use the money, fix the roads, show how you're carrying out repairs, or lose the money because it's councils who get on with the job of fixing our roads. And I'll make sure the Road Minister follows up with him.
Well, to Ellie Jones.
Thank you, Mr Speaker.
Given that the TUC has calculated that the wealthiest 10% of households in the UK hold more wealth than everyone else in the country put together, does the Prime Minister agree with me that it is inequality, not immigration, that is a threat to our country?
Well, Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, we need to deal both with the levels of immigration and with inequality, and that's what this government is doing. And as we get on with trying to boost our economy, can I gently point out that if we want more equality, if we want our economy to be stronger, their party needs to start voting for some of the measures that will make it necessary.
Michelle Walsh.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In March 2022, I gave birth to my son by emergency C-section. Both my son and my life put at risk by a failing maternity service. In Nottinghamshire, we know failing maternity services far too well, with harm caused to mothers, babies and fathers. Over 2,400 families involved in the Donna Ockington inquiry. So does the Prime Minister agree with me that grief must be the engine of change, and where previous governments has failed, it is imperative that this government transforms maternity services so that every birth is an informed birth and every birth is a safe birth?
Prime Minister. Can I extend my gratitude to my honourable friend and for all of those who spoke for their powerful and moving stories in the baby loss debate, I think, on Monday, Mr. Speaker. And I can assure her, I was actually at the Pride of Britain Awards on Monday night, and very many people came forward to me having heard some of the speeches from this House, particularly the personal testimonies. And so those stories really did have power in making the argument. We do need to fix what needs fixing, so we'll fix the maternity services, improve safety and make sure every mother is heard and gets high-quality care, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, my constituents have so many questions they'd like to ask the Prime Minister, but I'll settle for one today. Can the Prime Minister define when grey belt is really grey?
Prime Minister. Well, Mr. Speaker, let me give a simple example. We had an example of green belt, which was in fact a car park where building didn't take place, a non-green belt, which was an open playing field where building did take place. That doesn't make sense to me, and that's why we've got the policy we have.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 12-year-old Millie Blair from Oundle, who joins us today in the gallery along with her mum Gemma, her sister Jessica and her dad Gordon. On Millie's 11th birthday, she was diagnosed with a rare bone cancer, which led to her leg being amputated. Millie attends Prince William School but cannot access the lower playing field because the slope is too steep. Her parents, the school and I have asked the East Midlands Academy Trust to put in a ramp. They've refused, claiming they are not subject to certain parts of the Equalities Act. Would the Prime Minister agree with me that the Trust has an absolute moral obligation to make these adjustments so that Millie can have full access to all of her school so she can play and thrive with all of her friends?
Prime Minister. Can I just welcome Millie to the gallery? She's looking down. I appreciate the members opposite can't see her, but she's smiling down with the courage and positivity that I know is everything to her, and we absolutely salute that, and we're humbled by it. In relation to the decision, Mr. Speaker, I really do find it hard to understand how a school trust could make a decision like that in relation to the ramp. And rather than, as it were, berate them from here, I would just implore them on behalf of, I think, everybody here, and Millie in particular, to just look again and please, I hope with the endorsement of the whole House, to reconsider that decision, put that ramp in and match the positivity and the courage that Millie has shown all of us. And I thank the honourable friend for raising this campaign.
Will Foster. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Times has reported that local elections across the country will be delayed for a second year in a row. The leader of my local authority, Surrey County Council, has had to go on record to say that he hasn't called for elections to be cancelled, but other Conservatives clearly have. Mr. Speaker, can the Prime Minister give me a cast-iron guarantee that my constituents in Woking and others across the country will not lose their democratic right to vote?
Prime Minister. Well, I thank him for his question, and he knows we inherited a situation where local councils were underfunded and millions were wasted on duplication. By reforming the system, which is what we're doing, we will save money and reinvest it in improved public services. In Surrey, just in response to his question, we expect the elections to be in the new unitary councils, and we'll be setting out the planned timetable very shortly.
Alan Strickland.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Central to growing our economy is delivering major events that drive footfall and investment. So does the Prime Minister share my disappointment that since Reform took over the running of Durham County Council, they've slashed funding for Durham Pride, which brings in 20,000 people a year? So they can't cope with accountability, Mr. Speaker. They have cancelled the Lumiere Festival, which has brought nearly 1.5 million people into County Durham since it started, undermining businesses, undermining communities. Would the Prime Minister agree that if Reform can't run one county council, they certainly can't run Scotland, Wales or our United Kingdom?
Well, he's absolutely right to point out, as voters in Durham can see, what you get if you vote Reform is total chaos and broken promises. Mr. Speaker, councils have a vital role in our communities, and it's not just Durham where Reform are doing real. I think 4 councillors in Kent have just been suspended for bringing the party into disrepute. I mean, bring the party into disrepute is quite something for a party whose Welsh leader accepts Russian bribes to spread Putin's propaganda.
Sir Ashley Fox.
Mr. Speaker, Western Hospice Care provides an invaluable service for my constituents with a terminal illness. The hospice now faces an increased bill for national insurance charges of £139,000 a year as a result of the Chancellor's jobs tax. Now, the Prime Minister will know that the money he's announced for capital expenditure can't be used for day-to-day running expenses. He will know that the money he's announced for children's hospices won't benefit Western Hospice Care. So what help can he offer Western Hospice Care as they struggle under the tax burden imposed by his government?
Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, we're putting in the support that we can for hospices, and of course the money that we've put aside at the budget for the NHS is absolutely crucial in relation to that. The NHS was underfunded for 14 long years. We've now put the funding in to allow the NHS to do the work that it needs.
Julie Bibb.
Mr. Speaker, December will mark the 10th anniversary of the Storm Desmond floods that devastated my Carlisle constituency and forced thousands of people from their homes. Despite promising us new flood defences, previous Conservative governments left them unfinished. With climate-related rainfalls forecast to increase in the North West over the next decade, does the Prime Minister agree with me that the climate change sceptic policies peddled by some of the parties opposite are both reckless and dangerous? And will he assure the people of Carlisle that this Labour government will defend our great border city?
Prime Minister. Well, Mr. Speaker, she's absolutely right that the Tories left our flood defences in their worst state on record. And we, of course, are building them up again, investing over £10 billion to protect homes and businesses. And we've delivered over 150 flood schemes in our first year. And I want to see this progress even more rapidly. My honourable friend is a superb champion on this issue. We provided £300,000 to complete the feasibility study for stronger defences in her constituency.
Chairman Hall.
Mr. Speaker, as last week's urgent question highlighted, Jehoots, the pharmacy non-provider, is effectively de facto bankrupt and possibly even insolvent too. Last week we discussed at great length the impact that is having on patients securing their prescriptions. It is now becoming increasingly evident that staff, whilst being told by HMRC is being told by Jehoots they're being paid, are not. Lana Gulston and Blake Horwood in my constituency haven't been paid since the 18th of July. They are resorting to the kindness of friends and the support of food banks to make ends meet. The Minister, the member for Aberfan and my steg, is doing fantastic work to try to drive forward modernisation of the regulations. But this is now impacting the work of the Department of Business and Trade, HMRC and DWP. Could I urge the Prime Minister to convene those three departments alongside the DOHSC to secure a better deal and a fair deal for patients, but also for those who are currently employed and trapped in employment, not released by being made redundant, but are not being paid?
Minister. Well, can I thank him for raising this really serious issue, as he's done on a number of occasions, because it affects constituents of his, but also across the country. And it's simply unacceptable that customers and staff have been so badly let down. I know he will be meeting the relevant minister, but just let me update him here and now in a couple of respects, because officials are currently reviewing whether the Integrated Care Boards and the General Pharmaceutical Council need additional powers to address pharmacy businesses that do not play by the rules. And I think that's exactly the point he raises. That could include powers for the councils to go after business owners in addition to the pharmacy professionals. There'll be more detail when he has his meeting, but I thought it helpful to give those two indications.
Patrick Howley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well over 1,000 youth clubs have closed in this country since 2010. With a huge negative impact on our young people. This is despite the fact that youth clubs have had a long positive history in this country for helping young people to mature in a healthy fashion. In particular, FAB clubs help disabled and non-disabled people to build friendships in an inclusive environment. The FAB charity are here in Parliament later today to gain support for their work. So can I ask the Prime Minister to commend the work that they do, and can I also ask him to consider how best to support the youth club movement to help the next generation of young people grow into well-adjusted adults?
Well, can I thank my honourable friend for his question? He's a credit to his community. I know firsthand he's done so much hard work to help heal, to rebuild and to look to a brighter future for Southport. Can I welcome FAB Charity to Parliament? They do fantastic work, Mr. Speaker, to help break down barriers. And I'm proud that Labour is backing our youth clubs with £30 million of grant funding, doubling the numbers of youth hubs and providing a youth guarantee with earning or learning guaranteed for our young people. Our national youth strategy will be set out in the autumn.
Rebecca Smith.
Mr. Speaker, last week I invited the Prime Minister to match the Conservative pledge to scrap business rates for our high streets. However, he declined. Instead, he pointed me towards the small business strategy. Since then, businesses have been in touch to tell me that this strategy will make little or no difference to their future. With 14,000 high street businesses expected to close this year alone, and with retail businesses in my constituency facing a doubling of their business rates, when will this Labour government deliver on its commitment to reduce business rates, given that they are unprepared to accept our policy of scrapping them altogether?
Mr. Speaker, our small business plan was drawn up with small businesses. I sent her a copy online. I hope she shared that with the 3,000 small businesses in her constituency. They show what we're doing. Well, we're reflecting what they asked us to do before they shout rubbish. This is what they asked us to do. £1 billion of additional lending to small businesses, £3 billion extra for small businesses to scale up, dealing with late payments with the biggest reform for 25 years.
Alex Mayer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As Britain faced peril in World War II, Winston Churchill took a radical step. He changed the clocks to shift extra daylight into the evenings. As the clocks go back this weekend, would the Prime Minister take a look at the evidence on trialling Churchill time again to cut carbon, reduce bills, improve road safety, boost the hospitality industry, and be the Prime Minister who will brighten up all of our lives?
Prime Minister.
Well, I thank her for her question, and we'll look at the relevant material.
Thank
you, Mr. Speaker. Many in Glastonbury and Somerton are forced to travel hundreds of miles to see an NHS dentist, or suffer in agony, or fall into debt to pay for private treatment, or turn to DIY dentistry, like Jennifer, who extracted 2 of her teeth over the weekend. They simply can't wait for the consultation on the broken NHS contract. Mr. Speaker, they deserve immediate action. So will the Prime Minister outline what measures he's taking to end the dental desert in Somerset for good?
Prime Minister. Well, can I thank you for raising this, because added to the list of shocking things the last government left was the shocking state of NHS dentistry, broken like everything else under the last government. In relation to her question, we are rolling out extra urgent care appointments. In Somerset, Integrated Care Board is expected to deliver over 13,000 extra dental appointments this year, and I'll give her more details in due course. We're also reforming the dental contract, which will shift focus onto retaining NHS dentists.
Final question, Harpley Tupple.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ahmed Al-Ibrahim was only 16 years old when he was fatally stabbed in Huddersfield. His life was cruelly taken away in what the police described as an unprovoked and motiveless attack. On a visit to Netherhall Learning Campus in my constituency last week, I know how important this issue is for young people. So will the Prime Minister commit to redoubling efforts to tackle serious violence and knife crime through more visible policing, stronger prevention and investment in youth services?
Prime Minister.
Can I thank her for raising this devastating case, and my thoughts, I'm sure those of the whole House, are with the family and friends. Through our crime and policing bill, we're increasing penalties for the illegal sale of knives and giving police new powers to seize knives likely to be used for violence or cause harm. We've also launched a coalition to tackle knife crime, to bring together campaigners and community leaders to tackle the root causes of knife crime and help protect the next generation.
Front benches change over.
If colleagues could exit the chamber quietly and quickly, we will move on to the statement shortly. Quietly and quickly. We come to the statement on Heathrow, and I call the Secretary of State, Heidi Alexander.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I would like to update the House on the steps this government is taking to realise the benefits of expansion at Heathrow Airport, having invited proposals for a third runway earlier this year. Today, I am launching a review of the airport's national policy statement. Britain wants to fly, and this government will act to meet public aspirations. Our review of the AMPS will ensure that while we unlock long-term capacity for more flights at the nation's only hub airport, we will also meet our obligations to passengers, communities and the environment. Today is a step forward for UK aviation and infrastructure, supporting growth in the economy and enabling a modern, efficient transport system that harnesses international investment, boosts connectivity and strengthens UK competitiveness. We are committed to making a decision on a third runway at Heathrow within this Parliament, and we are clear on our ambition to see flights taking off on a new runway in 2035. We said we would get on with this, and we have. When the previous government set up the Davis Commission, it took them 5 years to publish the original draft AMPS. We'll get to the same point in 18 months, with the process completed by the end of 2026, showing our commitment to delivering progress swiftly but also robustly. When we say we back the builders, not the blockers, we mean it. But this is not a blank cheque. Expansion at Heathrow must minimise cost for passengers and customers. The taxpayer must not be expected to foot the bill. That is why the scheme will be privately financed, both the core project and the related infrastructure improvements. Extra staff and passengers must be able to get to and from the airport without turning the M4 and the M25 into Europe's largest car park. Crucially, the expansion must align with our legal, environmental and climate commitments. Starting the review of the AMPS is critical to delivering expansion and will provide the basis for decisions on any future planning applications. The world has changed since the last AMPS review in 2018 and when it was designated at that point. New environmental and climate obligations have been introduced and patterns of travel have changed. Stand in pretty much any UK airport this summer though, and you will have seen the busiest summer on record. We could put our head in the sand and pretend that this isn't the case, but we would be doing a disservice to our economy and the next generation. That is why, in carrying out this review, we will consider how any proposed scheme must meet 4 clear tests: that it contributes to economic growth across the country, that it meets our air quality obligations, that it is consistent with our noise commitments, and crucially, that it aligns with our legal obligations on climate change, including net zero. We will seek the independent opinion of the Climate Change Committee, and I will be writing to them shortly to request this advice. Whilst a third runway at Heathrow has been factored into Carbon Budget 6, it is right that we update our modelling and seek the views of the CCC. Given the national importance of Heathrow, we will also consider naming the airport as critical national priority infrastructure, in line with our approach to low-carbon energy projects. We are further considering whether to name a statutory undertaker as an appropriate person to carry out the project under the Planning Act of 2008, providing additional clarity to stakeholders and the local community. It is clear that this is a large and complex programme that requires a thorough and evidence-led approach. Over the coming months, my department will develop analysis on economic and environmental impacts of expansion. We will also undertake an appraisal of sustainability as required by statute, alongside a habitats regulation assessment and other necessary technical work. If amendments are needed to the AMPS as a result of the review, we expect to consult on an amended policy statement by next summer. Communities will be able to have their say, and we will shortly publish an updated stakeholder engagement approach to ensure transparency and fairness throughout the process. Madam Deputy Speaker, earlier this year, we invited potential promoters to submit proposals for delivering a third runway at Heathrow. 7 proposals were received and were considered by officials from the Department for Transport, from the Treasury and expert financial and technical advisors. Following this assessment, 2 potential schemes remain under active consideration: a proposal from Heathrow Airport Limited and a proposal from the Aurora Group. We know we must provide as much clarity and certainty for communities, investors and users of Heathrow as soon as possible. So we are seeking further information on the 2 proposed schemes with a view to reaching a final decision on a single scheme to inform the remainder of the AMPS review by the end of November. When making this decision, we will consider the interoperability of the proposed scheme with its existing infrastructure, the plans for transport to and from the airport and associated road schemes, the land take and impact on surrounding homes and communities, the evidence that the scheme can be privately financed, and the economic benefits of the scheme. This government is committed to moving quickly, but we will also do this properly. To deliver the scheme on time, the government is also pressing ahead with a series of enabling reforms. The Planning and Infrastructure Bill will streamline the delivery of major infrastructure, including Heathrow. This includes faster consenting routes and more proportionate consultations. On judicial reviews, we have announced that we will work with the judiciary to cut the amount of time it takes for a review to move through the court system for national policy statements and nationally significant infrastructure projects. We are establishing the UK Airspace Design Service to deliver modernised airspace. This will initially prioritise airspace design for the London region, supporting both Heathrow and the wider network. This will also make flight paths more efficient, so planes spend less time over London. We will initiate slot reform to ensure future allocation maximises benefits of an expanded Heathrow, as well as approved growth at Gatwick and Luton for passengers, local communities and businesses. Expanding Heathrow will be one of the largest infrastructure projects in the UK. Rigorous and effective cost control will be essential to its success, both in minimising any impact on airline charges and costs to passengers and in maintaining credibility with financial markets. The Government will therefore work with the Civil Aviation Authority to review the framework for economic regulation for capacity expansion at Heathrow, ensuring the model provides strong incentives for cost-effective delivery. We expect the CAA to publish a working paper in November, with a view to this work completing next summer. Madam Deputy Speaker, this is a landmark opportunity for Heathrow, for the aviation sector and for the UK economy. The Government remains fully committed to ensuring the expansion is delivered in a way that is timely, cost-efficient and environmentally responsible. I commend this statement to the House.
I call the Shadow Transport Minister, Richard Holden.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I'm grateful to the Secretary of State for her statement and also for advanced sight of it. Mr Speaker, this statement should have been brought to the House months ago. The Secretary of State surely recognises that today marks a delay and an acknowledgement of that rather than the decisive move forward. The truth is that this whole process has come about it the wrong way round, with recent announcements on Gatwick and Heathrow not driven by planned or prepared work, but by a clear attempt to divert attention from the Government's growing list of crises, scandals and cover-ups, rather than any clear plan for the future of British aviation. However, we on these benches nonetheless welcome the fact that the statement has finally been brought forward to the House, because both the aviation sector and passengers deserve clarity, as do local people who will be affected, and we hope that they will see sensible mitigations from these proposals. So can the Secretary of State also confirm what assessment the Government has undertaken so far of the costs, total costs of Heathrow expansion, given that one of the central estimates now stands at almost £50 billion, excluding an extra potentially £10 billion of further surface access works. Those figures would quadruple Heathrow's current asset base, already responsible for some of the highest passenger charges in the world. And if Britain is to remain competitive on the global stage, these costs must be kept down, not driven up. Crucially too, how will the Government therefore ensure that these costs are minimised, not maximised, as I'm sure the Secretary of State, like me, does not want those costs directly passed on to airlines and then passengers in higher fees, because affordability must be at the heart of any credible aviation strategy. Maintaining affordable flights is crucial for passengers, so can the Secretary of State assure the House that the Heathrow expansion will not result in significant pass-through costs, especially given how this Government's rises in air passenger duty, the jobs tax and now real concerns over business rates will also affect the aviation sector. I understand too that the Chancellor has claimed a third runway will be operational by 2035, something that the Secretary of State has reflected today, and she wants to see spade in the grounds during this Parliament. Of course, we welcome reforms enabled to do that. These reforms, however, will not have any teeth unless the Government commits to backing our plan to scrap the Climate Change Act. Otherwise, Heathrow expansion will face judicial review after judicial review, bogging down the process, driving up costs and delivering further delay. Even Labour's Mayor of London has said that he won't hesitate to launch legal challenges against a third runway. So can the Secretary of State commit to ensuring that her own Labour colleagues, including those she worked for previously, and allies will not be the ones who prevent this important project from ever seeing the light of day? Can she also commit to ensure that the associated roads and rail links to not just into London, but also to the south are included, so that expansion delivers genuine economic growth and connectivity for the whole of the United Kingdom? Madam Deputy Speaker, the Conservatives would end the constant threat of judicial review and eco-warfare to ensure that infrastructure across the country can finally be delivered on time and on budget and in Britain's national interest. It was great to hear her words on this from the dispatch box, but will these reforms she's talking about with the judiciary actually come into force before the decisions on Heathrow and the DCO are made, or will they be subject to the current situation we're facing? We on the these benches recognise that greater competition is the most effective way to deliver value for money and reduce costs to consumers. And I am grateful that the Secretary of State for her statement acknowledges that Heathrow expansion must minimise costs, but the only way to achieve that is through real and genuine competition. Heathrow's current structure has the potential to create perverse incentives that reward higher spending rather than efficiency, pushing up charges for passengers and airlines. And I note that the commitment from the CAA's review into economic regulation will begin in November, but that review must look seriously and fundamentally about how to embed competition and reverse perverse incentives. So can I ask the Secretary of State how she and the CAA intend to bring competition to the heart of delivering this project? And will she commit to that review, she said before summer, or in summer next year? Will it be before the summer recess so this House will have time to scrutinise it too? While this government continues to splurge cash, hike up taxes and debt and tie Britain in eco-warfare with their green allies, only Conservatives would restore confidence, break that cycle and deliver a stronger economy with world-class aviation at its heart. Sadly, under this government, taxes have risen to historic highs. They've imposed a punishing jobs tax and borrowing has soared to the highest levels since 2010 outside the pandemic, with £100 billion now there in annual debt interest payments. A third runaway alone will not shield the country from the consequences of Labour's economic mismanagement, but is a project that must be delivered correctly and responsibly and must also put passengers at its heart.
Secretary of State.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm interested by the Right Honourable Gentleman's comments about our pace of delivery, and I roundly reject his criticisms on this. We are the party that are accelerating Heathrow expansion, today setting out this swift and robust review of the AMPS to help us determine applications swiftly. Previous work to get a final Airports National Policy Statement by the last government took more than 5 years. This government will do it 3 years faster, Madam Deputy Speaker. We are getting on with the job, taking the important and sometimes difficult decisions to get Britain building. And I gently remind him that when his great ally and mentor, Boris Johnson, was Prime Minister, he went to such lengths to duck decisions on this issue that he ended up in Afghanistan. Madam Deputy Speaker, the Honourable Gentleman is absolutely right to care about consumers and cost control, and that's precisely why we are reviewing the AMPS and why we are starting the work via the Civil Aviation Authority on the model of economic regulation. I would say this to him: if we fail to plan for future capacity, prices will rise and choice will shrink. This review will be integral in keeping the UK competitive and connected by ensuring sufficient capacity, fair competition between global hub airports and sustainable growth. I agree with him that consumers deserve affordable fares and greener aviation, and that is what we are working to deliver. Madam Deputy Speaker, he also asks about climate change, service access, our reforms to judicial reviews. On service access, I can be clear with him that we expect this project and associated infrastructure improvements to be privately financed. Through the AMPS review, we will be looking holistically at public transport requirements, be that Southern Rail access, Western Rail access, how people get to and from central London. He will recall that in the spending review, we set out the biggest investment in London's transport for over 10 years, £2.2 billion, enabling TfL to buy new rolling stock on the Piccadilly line, 10 extra Elizabeth line trains, and we will work closely with our colleague, the Mayor of London and TfL, to ensure that appropriate infrastructure is in place. He talks about the changes that we are making to judicial review, and I would simply say this to him: we are acting where his government had their head in the sand. I am confident that the CAA will look carefully at competition issues in the work that they are doing. And I am also confident, Madam Deputy Speaker, ultimately I know that at Heathrow we could create 100,000 jobs through expansion. We could boost economic growth as well as opening up new opportunities for trade, tourism and travel. We will do this properly. That's what we're doing by launching the AMPS review today, and I look forward to answering further questions from other honourable members.
Select Committee Chair Ruth Cadbury.
Madam Deputy Chair, and I thank the Secretary of State for her statement today, and I look forward, hopefully, to the work she does on this AMPS to come to our committee in due course. Now, a third runway at Heathrow, combined with all of the other agreed or likely to be agreed expansions of capacity in London and South East airports, is an increase of 177 million passengers, 70% more than the number of passengers in London and the South East from 2024. So I look forward to the Climate Change Committee's response, because they said a 35% increase in capacity would be the maximum that would keep the UK compliant with our international legal commitments. But back to more specifics, in her statement she says she seeks to minimise costs for passengers and customers, but given the cost of runway 3 will be between 25 billion and 49 billion, how exactly will that not pass those costs on to the airlines and therefore the passengers if the Treasury isn't going to fund those costs, which we know that they're not? And on surface access, ever since the expansion of the building of the 5th terminal, the local authorities all around Heathrow have been pushing for southern rail access to Heathrow. Heathrow Airport have long said and have clarified recently they will not pay the cost of southern rail access. So how does she expect that to be funded if the M25 and the M4 are knocked to ground to a halt, if passengers and workers from the west of the airport and south of the airport are going to be able to get in and out of the airport? I would like to ask her to answer the how. Thank you.
Marvellous. Secretary of State.
My honourable friend is entirely right to raise these issues, and they are matters that we will be giving very careful and thorough consideration to through the Airports National Policy Statement review that will take place over the coming months. She refers to opinion that has been provided from the Climate Change Committee about capacity expansion. I would also say to my honourable friend, of course, that we are making very rapid progress in cleaning up the fuel that is used in planes, that we are we're taking huge efforts to reform our airspace so that we can have cleaner, more direct flights, and that the carbon intensity of flying has to come down if we are going to have more planes in the air. She is also right to highlight the importance of the regulatory model, and that is why we have asked the CAA to do this piece of work over the coming months, aligned with the review in the Airports National Policy Statement, and we will be saying more on that in due course.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Ollie Glover.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Secretary of State for her statement, which made the government's intent very clear to support this proposed Heathrow third runway. Although it was good to hear her recognise the complexity of all that will be needed to deliver it, including major diversionary works of two of the country's busiest motorways. And we here in the Liberal Democrats continue to support the right infrastructure in the right place, which is why we have always supported schemes such as East West Rail and Northern Powerhouse Rail. But it does need to be the right infrastructure to tackle the right problems. And there are many unanswered questions about Heathrow third runway. The New Economics Foundation has been very clear that in their analysis that the environmental impact of airport expansion will erode a lot of our carbon emissions reductions plans, and many studies have questioned the economic case
for Heathrow. I'd also perhaps be interested to hear from the Secretary of State about the dangers of relying solely on the private sector to fund large schemes. That was the case for the Channel Tunnel, which remains an enormously underutilised asset, partly because of the costs that have resulted of the decision to only have it private sector funded. It's welcome that the Secretary of State has made her support for this subject to 4 tests, but I do detect perhaps a slight hint of cognitive dissonance and contradiction, given that at the same time the government is setting out timelines for delivering something that they say is subject to 4 tests. So can I ask her very specifically, she mentioned the Climate Change Committee and that she will hear its independent advice. I ask the Secretary of State, if the Climate Change Committee decides that the preferred option for Heathrow third runway is incompatible with our carbon emissions and our net zero targets, will she drop her support for this third runway?
Secretary of State.
Can I start by congratulating the honourable gentleman on his appointment? He refers to research that has been done by the New Economics Foundation, and I should be clear with him that this government is absolutely committed to reaching net zero for the whole economy by 2050, and that we will meet our climate change obligations as set out in the Climate Change Act. We've also been clear repeatedly that any airport expansion proposals will need to demonstrate that they contribute to economic growth and can be delivered in line with the UK's legally binding climate change commitment. We will be engaging with the CCC as part of the AMPS review. Heathrow is only one part of the process. Of course, the expansion of Heathrow, Luton, Gatwick and Bristol airports, it was factored in to Carbon Budget 7, and he will know that the government in the coming weeks will be publishing its updated delivery plan for carbon budgets 4 to 6. I don't think we should see economic growth and our climate change commitments as being inconsistent with one another. I believe we can go further and faster in terms of cleaner fuels and technological developments. But I am also clear that people want to fly, and I don't think this government should get on the wrong side of public aspiration.
John MacDonald.
Can I first of all express my sympathy for the Secretary of State? She knows from her past experience that this is like watching a political car crash in action, and it's been thrust upon her by the Chancellor, so I express my sympathy for that. Because she knows that Heathrow have made a clear commitment they're not going to pay for the infrastructure. She knows that landing charges will go up, so passengers will pay for it. And she knows there's no way we can meet our climate change targets if this goes ahead. So that's why I express my sympathy. She's been given an impossible task. I just want, from my specific constituency interest, as she will know because Heathrow's in my constituency, she mentioned that the stakeholder engagement process will be published shortly. Could she be a bit more precise, first of all, about that timescale, and also what measures will be included in that? Because the House does need to know that in my constituency, 4,500 homes will be demolished or rendered unlivable. 15,000 people will lose their homes. We'll lose 3 schools. Whole communities will go. So my constituents will want to know, want to ask the question, where are they going to live? Where are their children going to be educated? And what will there happen to their overall community? We just need some certainty now, and the certainty from my point of view is to recognise that this is a white elephant. It's almost like watching HS2 all over again.
State.
I'm sure it won't come as a surprise to my honourable friend if I reject his characterisation of the work that I am doing. I see this as an opportunity, Madam Deputy Speaker, to improve our connectivity as a nation, to improve UK competitiveness and to ensure that we are delivering for businesses and passengers all across the UK. I do understand why my honourable friend raises the interests of his constituents who live closest to the proposed expansion, and he asked me for more detail about the timeline of consultation going forward. If through the AMPS review we make changes to the AMPS, then there will be a consultation that is done on that next year, and we are working on a timeline that would see a new AMPS designated by the end of next year, but I do give him a commitment to meaningful engagement and consultation, and we will be setting out the document that I referred to in my statement, which is a new stakeholder engagement approach so that people will be treated with fairness and we will be acting with transparency throughout this process.
Can I ask colleagues to keep the questions short so I can get everybody in? Lincoln Job.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Whilst I sympathise with the member for Hayes and Harlington, my Spelthorne constituency is on the southern side of Heathrow Airport, and the residents of Stanwell Moor, some 520 homes, are half a mile away from the southern perimeter. They have put up with a lot, including appalling behaviour by Uber drivers, by holiday parking near them, and with noise pollution. Can I ask that the consultation approach directly engages with the people of Stanwell Moor, and that we baseline the situation today as regards air and sound pollution by really measuring it so that we know the impact that is subsequently going to take place as a result of this airport expansion?
There will be a very thorough review of the noise requirements in the current AMPS and the mitigations that are currently set out in that document, and I can give him a commitment that will be meaningful engagement with his constituents.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Can my right honourable friend confirm this is not a done deal? Will there be, as part of the NPS review process, full and independent analysis of economic costs and benefits, of environmental effects, and of demand in London and the South East, given airport expansion elsewhere? As she says, the world has changed since 2018. Can my constituents, who will be seriously and detrimentally affected by any further expansion of Heathrow, be assured the government has their best interests at heart?
Madam Deputy Speaker, we will do this properly, and as the Secretary of State for Transport and as someone who may ultimately be the decision maker on any future planning application, I assure my honourable friend that I will approach this issue with an open mind and will apply the highest standards of professionalism and probity to the process that I'm currently overseeing.
Spencer.
Madam Deputy Speaker, Egham in my constituency is 5 miles away from Heathrow, and it's not the fact that it's overflown that I want to ask about today. The Shadow Secretary of State for Transport visited the patch on Monday, and we waited 12 minutes while level crossing barriers were down in Pooley Green. Now, she didn't mention trains as part of the consultation. Is that going to be within scope? Because if the expansion does go ahead, we desperately need to deal with our level crossings and have better rail access from Egham to Heathrow to make this work.
Secretary of State.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I do agree that we need to deal with the issue of level crossings on the rail network, and we will be looking holistically at rail requirements as part of the AMPS review.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Secretary of State for her statement this afternoon, and I'm pleased to hear that this will be a thorough and meaningful consultation, because even though my Vauxhall and Camberwell Green constituency isn't near the airport, we do, and constituents write to me on a regular basis, constituents from Camberwell, Stockwell and Brixton suffering from air pollution and noise pollution as well. The Secretary of State highlighted in terms of the infrastructure, and one of the key areas is around making sure more people are using public transport to Heathrow. And the reality is that some of the upgrades to the airport haven't had the funding over the many years. And as the chair of the Select Committee highlighted, I just wanted to tease that out a bit more from the Secretary of State in terms of that private funding, because at the moment we have a number of cases where we see some developers committing to something committee, but then the viability issue comes up and the money never seems to appear. So will she make sure that there is funding to secure the vital transport infrastructure to any new airport?
Secretary of State.
How people get to and from an airport is as important as the number of flights and planes that are landing and taking off. And so I can give my honourable friend an assurance that we will be looking at these issues very closely. I would also point out that Transport for London are currently buying a new fleet of Piccadilly line trains that in and of themselves have higher capacity. It's a larger fleet replacement programme. 10 new Elizabeth line trains are also being built. But we will look as a whole at the whole issue of how people get to and from the airport, because I agree with her that it's absolutely vital.
Munira Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Chancellor has staked her economic credibility and growth strategy on a third runway at Heathrow. The Secretary of State today has said that she's committed to seeing flights take off in 2035, yet at the same time she talks about taking an evidence-led approach and putting this project to her 4 tests, taking the advice of the Climate Change Committee and doing a thorough and evidence-led, doing a thorough economic and environmental impact assessment. So could she clarify for the House, because I fear my honourable friend didn't get a straight answer. If the evidence actually shows that the environmental costs are too great and the economic benefits are too little, is she, and crucially is her Chancellor, prepared to do a U-turn and can this whole project?
Secretary of State.
We see the huge opportunity and benefit that is associated with expanding capacity at Heathrow and having a third runway there. There will be a thorough process that we are starting today in reviewing the policy framework against which any planning application would be judged. The Planning Inspectorate will look at that and consider all the issues about economic need, air quality, noise, carbon, and then a decision will be taken. We do have an ambition to see planes taking off in 2035, but that doesn't mean to say that we aren't going to be doing a thorough process. We are committed to that, and that is what I'm setting out today.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It's abundantly clear that air travel is here to stay. In fact, has been rising over recent years. We, of course, need to take mitigation measures to tackle the noise and environmental impacts. But while we have been debating for decades ad nauseum about building a third runway, dozens of runways and indeed airports have been built by nations across the globe. So I asked my right honourable friend, the Transport Secretary, to safeguard the thousands of Slough households dependent on Heathrow to pay their bills, to boost business and trade, and to maintain our world-leading position in the aviation sector. Will she work at speed to tackle the blockages and finally help to deliver this third runway?
My honourable friend is absolutely right. We've had decades of dither and delay on this issue, and it is right that we crack on and start the process of reviewing the airport's national policy statement. He's also right to highlight the huge economic benefit that Heathrow, which is the single largest single-site employer anywhere in the UK, has in terms of the livelihoods and the opportunities for his constituents. We will move at speed, but we will also do this properly.
Mr. Speaker, as the Secretary of State knows from her time at City Hall, Heathrow has been a planning disaster since it was accidentally sited to the west of London, forcing planes to land over millions of heads. And while it might be amusing to watch the Secretary of State take the chainsaw to all those trees planted at Sipson by a series of Labour politicians, why she would compound that planning disaster, I have no idea. But more than that, she will also, if this goes ahead, be compounding the Heathrow monopoly on long-haul flights. So to her 4 rules, can I suggest she adds a 5th, which will be the impact of direct connectivity to and from regional airports, because there's a strong view that expansion of Heathrow would kill connectivity from Manchester, Birmingham, Bristol and elsewhere.
Secretary of State.
I actually think the opposite could be true. I think an expanded Heathrow could provide greater regional connectivity. He is right to highlight that Heathrow is our only hub airport and it accounts for over 70% of long-haul flights at the moment. It also accounts for over 70% of air freight by gross value as well. So it's a really important economic asset. And I repeat what I've said to others. We will move at speed and we will look at economic growth impacts across the entire country. But where he sees challenge, I see opportunity.
Andy Beales.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Secretary of State for her statement today. I welcome the mention of the 4 tests that will be part of the review, but it must be said that scepticism is running high in Hillingdon, where effects are greatest, that the 4 tests need to be more transparent, and so I'd encourage her to publish very clearly what those 4 tests are, what the metrics will be against which they're assessed, and ask her for a commitment that the data, the information that will be assessed will be fully and transparently shared with communities as early as possible so it can be interrogated. And I echo colleagues' comments about the need for meaningful engagement with the communities most affected? And can she confirm that that will not just be the formal consultation on the draft statement, but there will be meaningful early engagement for communities affected?
Secretary of State.
Mr. Speaker, we are moving at pace on this, but I do believe it is possible to have meaningful consultation opportunities as well. If through the review that we are conducting in the next couple of months it becomes apparent that we do need to change the AMPS, we will be consulting on a new draft by the summer of next year, and I will make sure that I remain in close contact with my honourable friend, who's a fearsome advocate for his constituents, because I know that it's really important that we do address concerns not just about noise, air quality, carbon, but also demonstrate that really important economic effect that expanding Heathrow could have.
Mr. Speaker, my constituents in Esher and Walton, particularly along the river in Molesey and Dittons, are very concerned about the increase in noise pollution from a third runway at Heathrow. Noise pollution which already affects us. So how can they be reassured that their views will be taken into account, unlike the top-down centralised planning policies that this government has implemented? So will the 4 tests be both transparent, meaningful and readily available to constituents? And can I please ask again, should it be shown that the climate commitments of the UK will not be met by this expansion, will the Minister U-turn?
This is the start of the process and not the end of the process. We will be transparent. We will be clear about those 4 tests. We will consult on an amended AMPS if that is required following the review. A planning application would then come forward. There would be consultation around that. There would be a public inquiry led by the planning inspector. There will be ample opportunity for people to make their views known on this. And I refer her to the remarks that I made earlier about treating this whole process with professionalism and integrity to make sure that we make the right decision for the future of the country.
Anderson. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Heathrow aircraft noise has a very significantly detrimental impact on my constituents in Putney. Similar hubs in other European countries have far fewer affected people. For Schiphol, it's 44,000, Charles de Gaulle, 133,000. But Heathrow, it's over 680,000 people are directly impacted by the noise. But currently, there's no legal noise limit. So I welcome the mentions of noise in the Minister's statement today. Will the Minister commit to a binding noise limit within the new strategy, as well as very strong environmental limits and full community consultation in this process?
Secretary of State.
I can tell my honourable friend that the current AMPS does set out very clear requirements on noise that any scheme would have to meet, and we will review those requirements alongside any necessary mitigation requirements, and we will consult on any changes. I should also say that the rules around the operation of a night flight ban, including the exact timings of such a ban, would be defined in consultation with local communities and relevant stakeholders.
Sir Olney.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The DfT's own updated appraisal report shows that the economic benefits of a third runway are either exaggerated or misguided. The Labour government are yet to produce their economic analysis, and meanwhile Heathrow Limited are in over £15 billion worth of debt, and their own proposal has increased in cost by 50% since 2016. So what makes the Secretary of State so confident that private financing is going to be found, not just for the proposals on the table, but for all of the surface transport upgrades that are going to be required?
Secretary of State.
The 2 promoters that remain in the scheme will be responsible for securing private investment and have expressed to me confidence that this scheme can go forward. I would also gently point out to the Honourable Lady that there is huge support for this amongst the business community, whether it's the CBI, the Federation of Small Businesses, the British Chamber of Commerce. They all support Heathrow expansion, as do regional business groups from across the UK.
Thank you.
you, Mr. Speaker. The Environmental Audit Committee has just completed some very detailed work on aviation expansion, which we'll be announcing soon. One of the things that came across with the Climate Change Committee were advising demand management as one of the ways in which this should be delivered consistent with our environmental commitments. I'm glad that the Secretary of State has reaffirmed that it will have to be consistent with that. But could you tell us, will demand management be a part of it? What assessment has she made about the aspects that will require government policy rather than things that are within Heathrow's gift, such as the expansion of sustainable aviation fuel and others? And finally, from her perspective, I'm glad to hear that she recognises this is a 21st century plan that has 20th century road links and 19th century rail links. Can she tell us more about how she's going to reduce the overall carbon emissions contribution that Heathrow makes in the future?
Mr. Speaker, I think there were probably three questions in one there. I would say this to my honourable friend. I'm not prepared to stand in the way of the public's aspiration to fly. We aren't looking at demand management at the moment, and our approach to aviation decarbonisation is one that's based on the analysis that suggests that the sector can really make a very significant contribution to our economy-wide net zero target by 2050, and that's by focusing on new fuels and new technologies.
Taylor. I'd mentioned the naming of Heathrow as a critical national priority infrastructure as a critical thing to try and end the disruption we've seen over the summer to power and systems. So I encourage the government to go forward with that. On the plans for transport to and from the airport and associated road schemes, can the Minister confirm that Southern and Western rail access and the new Southern Access Tunnel that will ease congestion on existing roads and emissions and the rail access to provide reliable public transport links for passengers and staff, are those costs to those projects included in the estimates that we've seen already? And again, as others have implored, can she ensure that that will be covered as part of the project and not left the taxpayer to pick up the bill? Sarah State.
I am clear that this project will need to be privately financed, and that includes the core project and the associated infrastructure improvements. It will be for the promoter who submits a planning application to set out in that planning application how it is consistent with the reviewed ANPS. But I refer him to the remarks that I did make earlier. I am clear that we need to ensure that the M4 and the M25 doesn't turn into a car park, because that won't result in the successful operation of the airport.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My honourable friend knows my constituency well and will know that my constituents in Hampstead and Highgate are very concerned about air quality in London. They're very worried that the expansion of Heathrow is going to affect air quality in the constituency, especially for future generations. So could I ask my honourable friend to reassure not just me, but local organisations like Green School Runs and London Air Quality, who are campaigning hard to ensure that air quality is not impacted and also is at the heart of the review and is not ignored by the government?
State.
Air quality will be one of the factors that is looked at through the ANPS review. Obviously, there may have been some changes in baseline conditions, given that the ultra-low emission zone is in force now compared to when the ANPS was last designated back in 2018. But we do take this issue seriously. It's why it's one of the 4 tests.
Will Foster.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. About an hour ago, the Prime Minister didn't answer my cast iron guarantee, so I wonder if the Secretary of State can do a bit better. My constituency of Woking is 16 minutes from Heathrow, yet has no rail link to our country's busiest airport. Can she give me a cast iron guarantee that if this airport is expanded, that Woking will finally get the rail link it needs?
Far be it from me to give a different answer to the one which the Prime Minister gave. What I can assure him of is that we will be looking at rail in detail through the ANPS review and the public transport requirements in order to be able to have an expanded Heathrow with a 3rd runway that operates successfully.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Providing jobs for 800 people and supporting a further 7,000, East Midlands Airport is a fantastic example of how aviation powers regional growth. Does my right honourable friend agree that whether it's Heathrow expansion or East Midlands Airport, delivering sustainable expansion in aviation isn't just about flights, it's about delivering jobs, apprenticeships, growth and securing Britain's leading role as a green aerospace and aviation leader?
So stay.
My honourable friend is right, and I know that East Midlands Airport plays a particularly important role when it comes to air freight as well, second only to Heathrow, and I think that's something that we don't talk enough about, given the importance to the economy, but I welcome the comments he's made.
Judge Just.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Now, I am and always will be a proud Yorkshireman, but I lived in West London for a number of years, so I'm aware of the diverse range of views on Heathrow expansion. I certainly don't subscribe to the Luddite NIMBYism of the honourable member for Hammersmith and Chiswick. But can I ask the Secretary of State what consideration she has given to potential Chinese investment into this critical national infrastructure?
So stay.
It will be for the promoters of any future scheme to secure financing for the development. I can reassure him that national security always comes first and foremost for this government, but we are keen to secure international investment so that we can boost UK competitiveness and improve global connectivity. It's central to everything we're trying to do.
Alex Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With regards to a new airports national policy statement, can the Secretary of State clarify if airports is in the plural? And if so, will she be looking to change the planning process so that it can take into account the cumulative environmental impact of different airport expansions around the country?
So stay.
The review of the airport's national policy statement is site-specific for Heathrow. In terms of the other applications that I have dealt with respect to Luton and Gatwick in the last couple of months, we did so using the Making Best Use of Runways policy, but the AMPS is specific to Heathrow.
Sean Barrett.
Speaker, Britain wants to thrive, but all I can hear is this government once again prioritising the needs of the most wealthy, most frequent flyers above those of us on the ground. So can the Secretary of State tell me what crumbs of our carbon budget will remain for the rest of us in our lives after this review is complete and after the fudge on Gatwick? If the tests say no, will she say no as well?
Sarah Stay.
I refer the Honourable Lady to the remarks I've made previously about carbon budgets. I would say this to her, though. I dispute the fact that it's only the wealthiest in this country that want to fly. And it may make me sad, but one of the highlights of life for me is, frankly, the bacon butty on an EasyJet flight to a Greek island in the summer. And I think that's an aspiration that is shared by a lot of the British public.
John Slinger.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I reassure my right honourable friend that many on this side want us to get on and build, baby, build? Much of the national conversation is understandably London-centric. Can my right honourable friend assure the House that regional airports, particularly those in the West Midlands, are being considered by the government, particularly the communities and the businesses that they support?
So stay.
I can assure my honourable friend that this government is ambitious for all airports across the UK, including regional airports. I was with the Chief Executive of Birmingham Airport only yesterday, and I'm really excited about their £300 million investment that they announced at the Regional Investment Summit yesterday into that airport. And just as with the expansion of Heathrow, there is huge potential for driving economic growth through our regional airports as well.
Sammy Wilson.
Mr. Speaker. Whilst most of the comments today have been critical, regions across the United Kingdom need a strong hub airport, and Heathrow provides that. And I would just seek assurances from the Secretary of State that, first of all, slots at any expanded airport will be ensured for flights from regional airports, and also warn her that given the way in which the climate change targets in Northern Ireland have been used to stop major infrastructure projects such as major roads, is she confident that by sticking by the Climate Change Act here that we are not giving a weapon to those who are opposed to this project and will use the courts to ensure that they get it stopped?
Secretary of State.
The honourable gentleman is right to highlight the opportunity for other regional airports and the regional connections that an expanded Heathrow could provide. It has been operating at about 95% capacity for much of the past 2 decades. And so we are taking slot reform forward, and we will be looking closely at a range of issues to make sure that we are maximising the contribution of that process to our economy.
Jacob Colley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I thank the Transport Secretary for her statement and recognise the national importance of this project? As she said, we must ensure that the whole of the United Kingdom benefits from this project should it go ahead, and I'm particularly keen that firms across Staffordshire and the Midlands are involved. So if she does approve this scheme, can she say how British firms will play their part in this nationally significant project?
So state.
My honourable friend is right to highlight the very significant supply chain that will exist not just in respect to the construction of a third runway at Heathrow, but in terms of the expanded airport and the opportunity that presents to the aviation sector. We will be reviewing the economic impacts through the AMPS review, and so there will be more detail available on all of that in due course.
Vicky Slade.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can the Secretary of State update the House with a bit more detail on the progress of the airspace modernisation regarding to noise, as residents in my constituency in Dorset on the flight path for Bournemouth Airport have no nighttime restrictions, seeing massive increases, and in places like Dorset they're being disturbed in their homes and in their sleep. And if regional airports are not going to be included, can the Secretary of State explain when we can get something further on regional airports?
So say.
This government has moved with speed to set up the UK Airspace Design Service, and we plan to have that mobilised by the end of the year. The first region we will be looking at is London, partly to do with the connection to expansion schemes in London as well. If she wants to write to me with the details of what her constituents are experiencing, I will look into the matter further for her.
Ben Coleman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does my right honourable friend recognise the severe concerns that my constituents in Fulham will have about aspects of this proposal, particularly the noise aspects, and hence the interest they will be taking in ensuring that the 4 tests are properly adhered to? Can she reassure me that she has no intention of watering down the AMPS to lessen the noise commitments in it?
So state.
As I said in response to a similar question from my honourable friend, the member for Putney, we will be reviewing the noise requirements that are set out in the current MPS and the mitigations associated with that. I have no intention, as I stand here today, to diminish in any way those requirements, but we will be looking at the new technology that's associated with new aircraft and new planes, and we will be doing a thorough piece of work. If any changes are made, we will consult on that before next summer.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. As far back as 2019, there was talk of manufacturing and the logistics hubs for the Heathrow hub actually being sited in Northern Ireland. Could the Secretary of State still give that reassurance that the whole of the UK will be considered in support of the manufacture of the third runway, should it go ahead, and sites will be considered in Northern Ireland, the likes of my constituency in Southampton, which is critical to the Belfast International Airport?
Secretary of State.
One of the 4 tests relates to economic growth across the whole of the UK. And when I talk about the whole of the UK, I mean the whole of the UK, and I hope that provides him with sufficient reassurance.
Peter Swallow. We got everybody.
Yeah. My right honourable friend knows how ambitious I am for improving connectivity from Bracknell to Heathrow Airport. Heathrow's proposals say that they're exploring the option of promoting a new rail scheme that combines the objectives of a Western Rail link to Heathrow and Southern Rail access to Heathrow. There are similar commitments in the Aurora Group's plans. Will my right honourable friend make sure that the review of the ANPS helps us hold them to account for those promises so we can deliver the better surface access that my constituents so badly need?
So state.
The AMPS will provide the policy framework against which any future planning application is assessed, and as I've said to other honourable members, when a planning application comes forward, there will be a thorough consideration process associated with that before any decision is taken, and there will be clear conditions set out on any planning decision relating to surface access.
Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Can I very much welcome the Secretary of State's statement today. Our words are encouraging, positive economic advantage for everyone, and thank you for that. The fact that Heathrow numbers look set to surpass last year numbers with 8 million passengers in August 2025 alone demonstrates, I believe, the need for an expansion is abundantly clear. Indeed, a fit-for-purpose airport can only increase revenue through tourism and connectivity for business. How can the Secretary of State ensure that the extension will secure regional airports connectivity, enhancement and a streamlined domestic service as well as international increases, and that Northern Ireland contractors can be part of the building of the new third runway? Thank you.
Secretary of State.
We are at the start of this process. I'm as ambitious for all of the UK as the Honourable Gentleman is, and we will be looking at the economic impact through the AMPS review, and were a scheme to come forward and get planning consent this Parliament, then I'm absolutely clear, and all government departments are, that we must make the most of this incredible economic opportunity.
Dr Scott Arthur.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the Secretary of State for her statement, her leadership, her focus on growth and the commitment to fit this within the Paris Agreement. I welcome the 4 tests that this is going to be judged again, but I do have a suggestion for a 5th one, and people might not be surprised to hear that it very much focuses on my constituency. So in recent years, Edinburgh South West has benefited from fantastic rail connections between Edinburgh and London, and also fantastic direct international flights from Edinburgh Airport to overseas. So does she agree if this goes ahead, it can't be at the detriment to places like Edinburgh?
So State.
My honourable friend is a fine champion for his constituency and the fantastic city of Edinburgh. I do think that an expanded Heathrow could open up more regional connectivity to cities such as Edinburgh. Of course, improving the rail network between our 2 capital cities is absolutely essential as well, and we're committed to doing that.
Tom Hayes.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. We urgently need to modernise and expand British airspace. It's at capacity and our growth depends on it. I was at Bournemouth Airport last week and we're close to a bus service and a public transport interchange, but Bournemouth Airport can't easily connect with European airspace as most traffic joins at a single space. That's particularly problematic given that I hope the Cherries, who are contesting for European football, get to play European teams next season. So will the government review and modernise our airspace and back regional airports like Bournemouth?
As I said in answer to a previous question, the work that the UK Airspace Design Service will be doing to modernise our airspace will start with the London area, but it won't be limited to the London area, but we do need to make that a priority, and I appreciate the case that he makes with respect to Bournemouth.
Final question, Lawrence Turner.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I wish to draw attention to my chairship of the GMB parliamentary group. As someone who worked on this issue last time round, I was astonished to hear the opposition's flight of fantasy when they accused others of delay. Under their watch, the Airports Commission was artificially delayed until after a general election. 3 more years spent producing the current MPS, a further 2 years tied up in the courts. Can the Secretary of State assure the House that the lessons have been learned from those 8 wasted years?
Secretary of State.
I totally agree with my honourable friend. It wasn't just 8 wasted years, let's be honest, it was 14 wasted years. And I repeat what I said earlier, it really comes to something when the previous Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, was going to such lengths to duck these decisions that he ended up in Kabul.
Right, we now come to a personal statement. Angela Rayner.
With permission, Mr Speaker, I'd like to make a personal statement. When I made my maiden speech over a decade ago, I said it was the honour of my life to represent Ashton-under-Lyne in this House. And alongside serving in this historic Labour government, it is still the honour of my life. I promised then to bring determination, commitment and my socialist values to this House while representing them, and I intend to continue doing so. My title may have changed, but the strength and the character of the people of my constituency have not. First, Mr Speaker, let me address the circumstances under which I left office. The last few weeks have been incredibly tough on my family, with my personal life so much in the public eye. All of us in public life know all too well the toll of the intense scrutiny we face places on our loved ones. But I've always believed in the highest standards of transparency and accountability. And it is what the public expects, and it is the price we pay for the privilege of service. That's why I referred myself to the independent advisor and gave him access to all of the information he needed. As I set out then, parents of a disabled child with a trust who divorce and seek different properties face a complex tax position. If there is one good thing, Mr. Speaker, that can come out of this, I hope that other families in the situation may now be aware of that and avoid getting into the position that I am now in. I am, of course, corresponding with the HMRC, and they have my full cooperation. There is no excuse not to pay taxes owed, and I will do so. This was an honestly made mistake, but when you make a mistake, you take responsibility. To serve at the highest level of government was a privilege, not for the title or the office, but for the chance to change the lives of the people I grew up with and live alongside. Every day, I work to serve those same working class communities. In every decision that I made, I thought of them. I know the power of politics, Mr. Speaker, to change lives because it changed my own. The last Labour government gave me the foundation to build a better life for me and my young son. A council house to support me, Sure Start to help me raise my kids, and the security of a minimum wage. A good job and decent, secure home is not too much to ask. But for too many, it is out of reach. That is what I was determined to change. For the people, all of us on these benches are fighting for, and we must keep fighting for. That's why, despite the fierce criticism and the relentless lobbying from vested interests, I'm so proud, Mr. Speaker, that within weeks, our landmark employment rights bill will become law. It's a game changer for millions stuck in insecure and low-paid work. It will give them dignity and security that they deserve. Now, Mr. Speaker, there are those that say we can't afford to deliver new rights for working people, and I say we cannot afford not to. Labour is at its best when we're bold, and I've been so proud to work alongside some of the trade unionists who nurtured and supported me to deliver the biggest upgrade to workers' rights in a generation. This is a personal statement, Mr. Speaker, but the trade union movement taught me that it's not about yourself, it's about us. It's about who we're here for. And everything that I've done has been an endeavour for us, for our people who elected us and who we serve. As Secretary of State for Housing, it was my solemn duty to the Grenfell Tower inquiry. It is difficult to think of a more humbling experience. A stark reminder of what happens, Mr. Speaker, when we forget who we're here to serve. It's been a privilege to work on behalf of those families, and it's why this government will pass a duty of candour. Make no mistake, the Hillborough law is for the 97 and their families. But it's also for the sub-paymasters who endured the Horizon scandal, the victims of the infected blood, and those who died or whose lives were changed forever in the Grenfell Tower fire. A line in the sand that says the public will always come first. And I'm also incredibly proud that this Labour government provided the biggest investment in social and affordable housing in a generation. It was the foundation of a decent home that gave me the security to build my life on. Now we must provide a safe and decent home to millions of people across this country.
Hear, hear.
And when our Renters' Rights Bill returns to the House this afternoon, we will give a generation of renters the protections, the security and the rights that they deserve. Yeah. From votes at 16 to historic investment in homelessness prevention, neighbourhood renewal to fair funding for the whole country and putting power back where it belongs in the hands of working people everywhere. I was proud to lead, but we achieved together. With my honourable friends on these benches and the support of our entire movement, the lifeblood of this Labour government. When I think back about how far I've come, I remember when, at age 16, I was pregnant with my child, needing a job and a home. People wrote me off, assumed that I'd be on benefits the whole of my life. But, Mr. Speaker, I wanted to prove them wrong. Yeah. I've carried that with me, whether it's on these benches, at the dispatch box, or representing this country abroad. The support and advice of so many friends and colleagues has kept me going. But I want to give a special mention to my excellent ministerial and parliamentary team, my honourable friends, the members for Greenwich and Woolwich, Oldham, West and Royton, Nottingham North and Kimberley, Wellingborough, Huddersfield and Gateshead, and my noble friends, Lord Khan and Baroness Taylor, and my superb parliamentary and political staff, and the many excellent civil servants. And I want to say a special thank you to many of my constituents and the public who have made contact with me. I offer my successor and his new colleagues my congratulations and, of course, my support. I am fortunate to count so many, not just as honourable friends, but actual friends.
Hear, hear.
I'll just finish by saying, Mr. Speaker, that in each generation, it has fallen to a Labour government to strengthen the hand of working people. Yeah. Yeah. In 1945, it was maternity pay and the NHS and homes for heroes out of the ruins of war. In the 1970s, it was Barbara Castle and the fight for equal pay. Yeah. And in the 90s, it was the national minimum wage. Yeah. And despite the opposition, because of the work of this Labour government, we have the opportunity to write a new chapter of justice and fairness for working people. Yeah. Now, Mr. Speaker, as tough as politics can be, it is nothing compared to what thousands of my constituents and this country face every single day. Yeah. Backbench or frontbench, elected office is not about us, but about our chance to change the lives of others. And from wherever I sit on these benches, I will fight with everything I have to do exactly that.
I will just let the chamber clear one before I come to the points forward that's coming for those who are leaving. Board amendment ejected.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last week, I was notified by the Table Office that my Cabinet Office oral question about the £97 billion increase in failing major project spending that this government has overseen had been selected to be answered by the government. However, it doesn't appear in the list of questions to be answered at Cabinet Office oral questions tomorrow. The Cabinet Office has declined to answer and has removed it from the list of questions, thus meaning it will not be asked or answered in the chamber. Mr. Speaker, I've long suspected that the government has been manipulating the oral question process in its favour. How can the general public have any confidence in the parliamentary process or holding the government to account when it can avoid scrutiny by picking and choosing only the questions it wishes to answer? I'm sure the government wouldn't wish me to submit any more written questions, so what guidance can he give as to how best to ensure my constituents in Huntingdon get the answers that they deserve?
Can I first of all say, I thank the honourable gentleman for noticing the point of order. The transfer of questions between departments is a matter for the government rather than the chair. His concerns are now on the record, and I would hope the Treasury bench will have noted what he has said, and I would add that there is always expectation that departments inform members of such transfers. If there is a continuation, I'm sure that he won't leave it there, but please come and let me know.
Point of order.
Sorry, one point. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On Monday, the Secretary for Culture, Media and Sport told the House in relation to the Maccabee match that the risk assessment was based, and I quote, in no small part on the risk posed to fans attending to support Maccabi Tel Aviv because they are Israeli and because they are Jewish. Yet reports last night revealed that the decision to ban away fans was due to intelligence suggesting the main threat came from extremist Maccabi Tel Aviv fans themselves, and they were the likely perpetrators of trouble in Amsterdam last year. The Ministerial Code requires ministers to give accurate and truthful information to Parliament. If the Secretary had this information before her statement, she must correct the record. Mr. Speaker, can you ask her to clarify and return to the House immediately if she has breached code that governs all parliamentarians?
Unfortunately, no, I've not got such powers. Maybe at times I would welcome them. What I would say is, I do thank the honourable member for giving notice of the point of order. Ministers are responsible for the words in the House, and the Ministerial Code is not a matter, I say, for the Chair. But he certainly put his views on the record, and I'm sure that once again we'll find that the Treasury bench will be listening. Point of order, John Butler.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, at the beginning of PMQs, I rushed in and walked in between a question of the Minister. I just want to apologise. I was rushing in from celebrating Diwali and New Year from my temple in Wealdstone, and on Monday I was celebrating Diwali and New Year at my temple in Neasden, the largest mandir in the UK, and the day before I was celebrating in Kingsbury. I would just like to wish everybody celebrating New Year and Happy Diwali today.
Can I first of all say that's probably the worst point of order in an apology. What I would say is Happy Diwali to all of the temples that you've visited, and you certainly got on the record. And I hope next time you'll wait at the bar. There we are, right. Well done, Don. We now come to Presentation Bill, Rachel Maskell.
Removal of titles bill.
Second reading what day?
Friday, the 31st of October.
Friday, the 31st of October. Thanks, Rachel. Right, we now come to the 10-minute rule motion. Laura Kirk-Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move that leave be given to bring in a bill to require the provision of mental health assessments in NHS antenatal care for the purpose of identifying those at risk of perinatal mental health problems and making referrals to appropriate support, and for connected purposes. Madam Deputy Speaker, we often assume that pregnancy, birth and the year after birth are a time of life to be happy, celebrating the arrival of a new baby, embarking on a new chapter in family life. And for some people, this is how it pans out. But for many, the reality is much tougher. I've spoken previously in this House about my brilliant friend, Sophie, who took her own life after the birth of her third child, who was just 10 weeks old at the time. That was 4 years ago, and her death remains a huge sadness in my life and for her family, some of whom are in the gallery today. But the shock of it still sits with me too. I didn't know, and many of us don't, that suicide is the leading cause of death for a woman in that period from 6 weeks to a year after giving birth, a statistic recently reconfirmed by the latest Embrace UK report. And while Sophie's death is a particularly serious example, I also didn't know the scale and normality of mental illness at that time in a woman's life. 1 in 4 women experience some sort of mental health difficulties during pregnancy or after giving birth. It can be anything from depression to anxiety to obsessive-compulsive disorder or post-traumatic stress disorder, and it can be completely debilitating for mums and their families. And the consequences ripple out more widely too. The London School of Economics and the Centre for Mental Health estimate that untreated perinatal mental illness costs this country over £8 billion a year, largely through the long-term impact on the child's health, education and future productivity. Madam Deputy Speaker, in theory, women are asked about their mental health early in pregnancy. The guidance from NICE, the National Institute for Health and Care Excellence, specifies that questions about depression and anxiety should form part of a woman's first contact with health professionals during pregnancy, including the booking appointment. But in practice, women's experiences vary enormously. Some women are asked a few hurried questions between blood pressure checks. Others are not asked at all. Women with a previous history of mental illness may be given more attention, but we know that pregnancy and early motherhood can often be the first time that women experience mental illness, so that's not enough. Some GPs and midwives have the training and time to offer support. Others are stretched far beyond capacity. Some have established mental health services to refer women onto. Some are almost afraid to ask the right questions because they don't trust that a referral will kick in. So the result is a postcode lottery where a pregnant woman's access to mental health support can depend on the NHS trust they happen to fall under. But it's also a lottery that a woman is more likely to lose if they are black, Asian, young, experiencing domestic violence, experiencing poverty or other forms of deprivation. Because as in so many other areas of healthcare, the pre-existing inequalities correlate with poorer outcomes. And that's why this bill matters, because every woman, regardless of age, ethnicity, background or postcode, deserves the same standard of care and the same chance to be mentally well at this time in their life. Madam Deputy Speaker, we're not starting from scratch. In the 10-year health plan, the government has set out its determination and its plan to reorient our health system away from treatment towards prevention, away from hospitals towards the community. Ensuring that pregnant and new mums are mentally well is one of the ultimate acts of prevention, setting them and their children up for a healthy, productive future. On mental health specifically, including on better support for suicidal people, the government has also made its commitment very clear and matched it with action. In the last year, an additional 6,700 mental health professionals have been recruited. £120 million is being invested in dedicated mental health emergency departments, ensuring that those in crisis can get help quickly. And we're rolling out the Best Start Family Hubs, which are a transformative initiative that will provide families with a single route into support services, including mental health. So my bill builds on these commitments, but it focuses the mental health support at the very start of motherhood when women need it most. We're not starting from scratch in our understanding of good practice either. At a roundtable I convened here in Parliament in September, bringing together NHS England, the Maternal Mental Health Alliance, the Royal Colleges, parents with lived experience, other experts, the message was united and clear. Professionals want to help, but they need structure and time and training to do it properly. The Royal College of Midwives has just published a roadmap for perinatal mental health care, which sets out what this could look like, and it's well worth a read. But I'll turn to the detailed proposals in the bill. It sets out a clear, practical framework for mental health assessments, and it has 4 core pillars. The first is to ensure that every pregnant woman has a structured, evidence-based and compassionate mental health assessment. While mental health check-ins must continue after the birth of a baby too, the evidence shows that outcomes are better when interventions happen sooner. So that's why I focus my bill on improving support in the antenatal period first. This assessment would form part of the routine antenatal care. It's not an extra. It would use validated tools such as the Hooley questions or the Edinburgh postnatal depression scale adapted for pregnancy, and it would be rooted in NICE guidance, though this may need updating to ensure that better practice is embedded. Crucially, it would be delivered through trauma-informed conversations, not tick-box exercises, where staff would be trained to create a safe space for disclosure, recognising that women may have histories of trauma that affect their mental health during pregnancy, or may have no history of trauma or mental illness at all. The second pillar of the bill is to improve training and supervision for all professionals involved in maternity care. GPs, midwives, obstetricians, health visitors and community mental health practitioners all need the knowledge and confidence to ask the right questions, to do so compassionately and to recognise when something isn't right. This bill calls for a national training standard endorsed by NICE and the Royal Colleges and delivered across NHS trusts and integrated care boards. It should include regular clinical supervision so staff are supported to ask questions and make decisions safely. And importantly, this training must equip professionals to recognise and respond to the specific needs of women from diverse backgrounds, understanding cultural differences in how mental health is expressed and experienced, and addressing the stigma and the barriers that prevent some women from seeking help. Third, this bill sets out the need for clear referral pathways, because while midwives, GPs and others involved in routine maternity care should be equipped and able to identify mental health risks, they shouldn't also be delivering the specialist care when it's needed. So the clear referral pathways into mental health services, the specialist services, are vital. The Maternal Mental Health Alliance recommends that a specialist perinatal mental health midwife is embedded in every maternity service to ensure that those risks are identified and the referrals made effectively. And that appropriate support will then be different for every woman. But one important option is the NHS Talking Therapies programme, which I know the government is committed to. And I've seen in my own constituency of Aylesbury how helpful this can be for women. And I would urge the NHS Talking Therapies services to consider women in the perinatal period as a priority group for support. There are also fantastic voluntary services out there in communities across the country, such as Pandas and many of those under the umbrella of the Hearts and Minds Partnership. And yet many women are not made aware of them through their routine antenatal care, and they should be. Fourth, and finally, this bill calls for clear accountability to ensure effective delivery of perinatal mental health assessments. NHS England and integrated care boards would be responsible for ensuring that local maternity systems introduce the single standardised assessment process, but then also crucially capture the data through the maternity services data set, allowing the outcomes to be tracked. And there must also be improved oversight of these services from the Care Quality Commission as part of its maternity inspections. Madam Deputy Speaker, I hope the aims of my bill are clear, and I hope that the government and colleagues in this House will look upon them favourably. I know resources are tight across the NHS, and I know there are particularly acute challenges in many of our mental health and maternity services, including the national shortage of midwives currently. But I also know how transformative the relatively modest measures in this bill could be for the women at the heart of the bill and for our society. It could have made a difference for Sophie, I believe, and it still could make a difference for the many women who are struggling with their mental health now or will do in future. Because ultimately this bill is about even more than mental health care for women. It's about the kind of country that we want to be. Because when parents are mentally well, they thrive, their children thrive, and our communities become places not of fear and insecurity, but of hope and opportunity. That's the kind of country that we want to be, and improved perinatal mental health care is such an important part of it. Madam Deputy Speaker, I commend this bill to the House.
The question is that the honourable member have leave to bring in the bill. As many of their opinions say aye. Aye. The contrary no. The ayes have it, the ayes have it. Who will prepare and bring in the bill?
Paulette Hamilton, Sojourn Joseph, Dr Danny Chambers, Liz Twist, Sarah Hall, Maya Ellis, Jen Craft, Michelle Welsh, Anna Sabine, Lee Pitcher, Dr Simon Ofer and myself, Madam Deputy Speaker.
Laura Kirk-Smith. Well done.
Perinatal Mental Health Assessments Bill.
Second reading what day?
Friday the 31st of October.
Friday the 31st of October. Well done. Right, I'll give the front benches a moment to shuffle over before we go on to the next set of business. Right. The clerk will now proceed to read the orders of the day.
Renters' Rights Bill. Consideration of Lord's message.
You say now. Now. We begin with the government motion to agree with the Lords in their amendments 19B, 19C and 19D, with which it will be convenient to consider the government's motion to agree with the Lords in their amendments 39B and 39C. I call the Minister to move the motion to agree with the Lords in their amendments 19B, 19C and 19D. Minister Matthew.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Today is a momentous day. That is because, subject to agreement from this House, the Renters' Rights Bill will have completed all its stages and will therefore shortly become law. This House last legislated to fundamentally alter the relationship between landlords and tenants in 1988. I was just 6 years old. In the decades since, England's private rented sector has changed beyond all recognition. It now houses not just the young and the mobile, but many older people and families with children for whom greater security and certainty is essential to a flourishing life. The need to overhaul the regulation of the private rented sector and in so doing level decisively the playing field between landlord and tenant is pressing. That's why we introduced the bill within months of taking office. We promised that we would succeed where the previous Conservative government had failed, by legislating to transform the experience of private renting. I'm delighted that we are now within touching distance of seeing the bill become law. Before I turn to the final amendments agreed to in the other place, I want to put on record once again my profound thanks to Baroness Taylor for so ably guiding the bill through its House of Lords stages. Madam Deputy Speaker, I made clear when we considered Lords... I will give way briefly.
I do thank the Minister for giving way, and I too welcome the Renters' Bill becoming law. I personally wished it was also regulating rent levels, but my question is, how quickly will it become law to protect people, many of whom over the last year, while this bill has been wending its way through Parliament, have faced the appalling situation of no-fault eviction. Many have lost their properties as a result of it, whereas they would have been protected had the bill become law more quickly. Can he give me some idea that I can give some comfort to my constituents who are facing no-fault eviction, how quickly they will get protection, and will there be any retrospective element to it?
Yeah. I thank the right honourable gentleman for that point. We do want to provide both renters and landlords with certainty about how the new system will be implemented. I'll say a bit more on that in the course of my remarks. As I was saying, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm going to make a bit more progress if I can. As I made clear, Madam Deputy Speaker, when we considered Lord's amendments to the bill on the 8th of September, while the government was not prepared to accept amendments that would undermine the core principles of the bill, we were more than willing to make sensible changes in response to legitimate concerns raised. The changes we are proposing today are firmly within the spirit of that commitment. I'm delighted that we were able to reach agreement with the Liberal Democrat front bench and Lord Young of Cookham, and I thank all those noble lords involved for their willingness to work collaboratively to strengthen the bill. Let me briefly set out the purpose and effect of the amendments in question, beginning with those that relate to shared owners. Lords Amendments 19B, 19C and 19D exempt shared owners from the 12-month no-relet period in respect of new mandatory possession ground 1A that allows a landlord to evict a tenant because they intend to sell their property. The exemption is subject to meeting set criteria to ensure that shared owners have made a genuine attempt to sell their property. The amendments in question also include a delegated power to remove the exemption in the future, for example, once the building safety programme has been completed. I'll give way briefly. And then
Can I thank the Minister and welcome what's been put forward. Over the last period of time in my constituency, we've had more and more of these issues coming to our attention, where tenants have to find alternative and affordable accommodation for close to their work or close to their education for their schooling. I know this legislation applies to England and Wales only, and I understand that. But the Minister's a good Minister, and he always shares the information the legislation put forward with the Regional Assembly. In my case, Northern Ireland Assembly. Would the Minister and do me a favour and do this House a favour of sharing the legislation with the Northern Ireland Assembly to ensure the good things that are in this can become the good things for us in Northern Ireland as well? Thank you.
I thank the honourable gentleman for that intervention. The Northern Ireland Assembly can access this legislation online, but I will certainly continue to have conversations with ministers in all of the devolved administrations as to what lessons we can learn about from what we have done with this bill and that they can take from it, absolutely. Madam Deputy Speaker, I was saying that I commend Lord Young of Cookham once again for championing the interests of shared owners affected by the building safety crisis and thank him for tabling his 3 amendments in lieu. As I made clear when we considered Lord's amendments last month, the government recognised the plight of shared owners living in buildings that require remediation. Many are facing unaffordable costs, often with no viable exit route other than a distressed sale. We also appreciate that it is often harder to secure a purchaser for a shared ownership property and that the sales of shared ownership flats are more likely to fall through due to the additional constraints involved. As such, we've always accepted that the 12-month no-relet period would have placed many shared owners in an extremely challenging position. The reason that the government did not feel able to accept Lord Young's original Lords Amendment 19 was that it could undermine protections for the small subset of tenants who happen to rent a sublet home from a shared owner. I'm therefore pleased to report to the House today that the amendments in lieu before us deliver the core aims of that original amendment, whilst also ensuring 3 key safeguards are in place to protect tenants. These safeguards are as follows. First, there is a requirement for the shared owner to have informed the assured subtenant in writing at the outset of the tenancy about the exemption and its possible use. This will ensure tenants are aware of the particular circumstances of the tenancy they are entering into and can make an informed choice as to whether they wish to enter into a tenancy agreement with the shared owner in question. Second, shared owners must have informed their provider of their intention to sell before obtaining possession of the property from the tenant. This is an essential first step all shared owners must undertake in order to begin the process of selling their property, and I'm satisfied that it is a proportionate requirement, evidence that a shared owner is genuinely intending to sell their home. Third, a valuation must be undertaken on the property by a member of the Royal Institution of Chartered Surveyors, or the shared owner must have advertised the property for sale. This can be done at any point before a property is relet, recognising the need for flexibility in how shared owners will approach a sale. Taken together with the protections that are already in place as a result of registered providers having to authorise subletting requests, having oversight of what rent levels can be charged, I'm satisfied that these safeguards will reduce, if not eliminate entirely, the risk that an exemption from the 12-month no-relet period might otherwise have posed. Turning next, Madam Deputy Speaker, to Laws Amendments 39B and 39C. These will introduce a statutory requirement for annual reporting on the extent to which service family accommodation meets the Decent Home Standard. I will give way.
I'm very grateful to the Minister for giving way, and I'd like to thank him for listening to Liberal Democrat colleagues who have made these points, as I have, along with our spokesperson on previous occasions. It's very good that those living in military service accommodation will now have the opportunity to access the Decent Home Standard. I wonder if the Minister could give me the assurance that he will work with ministerial colleagues in the Ministry of Defence to ensure that all those service families are aware of the Decent Home Standards and the standards to which they can hold their accommodation providers in order that they can live in better homes in my constituency of Bicester and Woodstock and across the country.
I thank the honourable gentleman for that question. We have ongoing dialogue with ministerial colleagues in the Ministry of Defence about this issue. And if he'll allow me, I'll elaborate on how we think these amendments will work in practice and how they interact with what the Ministry of Defence is itself doing. Can I firstly, though, thank once again Baroness Grender, Baroness Thornhill and the honourable members for Taunton and Wellington and North Shropshire for their continued support and advocacy for service personnel and their families. The Government has been clear throughout the passage of the bill that our armed service personnel and their families must live in safe and decent homes. We remain determined to improve the standard of service family accommodation across the entire defence estate. Alongside the commitment to drive up standards through a record investment of £1.5 billion in service family accommodation over the next 5 years, the Government will also soon publish a defence housing strategy, setting out clear renewal standards and further steps to improve the lives of those who serve our country. And that is a standard that will be published, able for service families to see, to judge against, and will interact with this new statutory duty. Because as I outlined in the previous debate on Lord's amendments, the Government acknowledges the need for greater transparency and accountability to ensure the commitments we have made are honoured. The amendments in lieu from the Government before us will place the commitments I made to this House last month on a statutory basis. Alongside the wider steps I've already set out, the Government believe this will help ensure service personnel and their families have the quality of homes they deserve. The amendments also include a delegated power allowing the housing quality standards that SFA is assessed against to be updated when the current version of the Decent Home Standard is no longer considered appropriate, for example, when it has been replaced by a new modernised standard. The Liberal Democrats have indicated their support for these amendments, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I hope honourable members will join me in supporting them today. To conclude, Madam Deputy Speaker, I urge the House to support the amendments put forward by the other place, and I very much look forward to the remainder of the debate. I beg to move.
The question is, this House agrees with the Lords in their amendments 19B, 19C and 19D. I call the Shadow Secretary of State, Sir James Cleverly.
Madam Deputy Speaker, thank you. We're considering today the Lords' amendments in lieu to the Renters' Rights Bill, and I begin by recognising the work that has taken place in both houses to try to improve this legislation, and by thanking their lordships for the constructive way in which they have approached this endeavour. On the amendments themselves, on shared ownership leaseholders, this issue was rightly championed in the Lords by my noble friend Lord Young of Cookham, and I pay tribute to him for his persistence on this issue. He made a fair and compelling case for shared owners who, through no fault of their own, may be unable to sell their share and should not be penalised for reletting in those circumstances. And the Government's acceptance of that principle, though through a modified amendment, is, I think, a sensible and pragmatic improvement, and therefore we will support it. On the Decent Home Standards and the service family accommodation estate, the Government placed a duty on the Secretary of State to report on the conditions of service family accommodation and provide independent oversight. Our armed forces and their families deserve and need decent, well-maintained homes, and greater transparency will, we believe, strengthen the confidence of those service families in the system. So we support this improvement and hope that the government will look at our policy to create an armed forces housing association that would oversee these changes and address the declining recruitment and retention rates that sadly we have seen under this government. Madam Deputy Speaker, while we support these improvements, the bill in its current form will in some areas be, I fear, counterproductive and drive landlords from the market, as well as putting up rents for tenants. Labour's own impact assessment for this bill supports this concern, and I quote, landlords can pass through some, but not all, of their cost increases to their tenants in the form of higher rent due to new costs. Under the bill, all tenancies will continue until either the tenant gives notice or the landlord obtains a court order for possession on specific grounds. Now, the government has committed to ending Section 21 evictions, but they must also ensure that court reform matches so that the system works for both tenants and responsible landlords. And we need clarity about when and how these changes will be implemented. Because, Madam Deputy Speaker, uncertainty helps no one. Local councils must have the means to enforce the new rules effectively, and the government should set out a clear and workable plan to that end. The amendments before us represent a sensible set of adjustments that make this bill, I would say, slightly more workable. Though sufficient challenges remain in how it will operate in practice. We recognise the value of the scrutiny that has taken place in both houses and the constructive way that many of the concerns have been addressed. But the uncertainty in this sector is seeing landlords leave the market at alarming rate. I will give way.
He knows I've got a great deal of time for him as a person, but he must reflect that all of his speech is talking about the rights of the landlord and absolutely nothing on the rights of the tenants. In my own constituency, there are 600 children in temporary accommodation, in large part driven out of their private rented accommodation because of no-fault evictions. Does he have anything to say about the rights of tenants?
Madam Deputy Speaker, I can only assume that he's been asleep through the last couple of paragraphs that I read out where I specifically spoke about the rights of tenants in the military estate, for example. So I reject his characterisation of our position. But the simple fact is, tenants' rights are all well and good, but if accommodation for those tenants does not exist, they are no better off. And what we have seen, an estimated 18% of new homes for sale, which were previously in the private rental market estate. And in London, that figure is 29%. And a reduction in the private rented sector market harms, not helps, people seeking to rent in the private sector. And I know the benches opposite will say, oh, well, we're going to deliver 1.5 million new houses. No one, I doubt even their own front bench, actually believes they have any chance of delivering that figure at all. And certainly the OPR doesn't believe they have any credible chance of doing this. So the housing and rental situation is likely to get worse. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, on behalf of the opposition, for the reasons that I have set out in my speech, I can confirm that we will support Lord's amendments in lieu. But we urge the government to implement them professionally and swiftly and focus on delivering a fair and effective system for tenants and for the landlords that provide accommodation to those tenants, and also the wider housing market. And whilst I have said there are still, we fear, a number of flaws with this bill, and it does not do enough to protect renters or ensure a stable rental market, and has the risk of reducing supply and perversely pushing up rents, which is why, having committed to not oppose the amendments in lieu, we will be holding this government to account for the consequences of this bill.
Kevin Bonavere.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I fully support my honourable friend the Minister's motions today in regard to Lord's Amendments 19 and 39. I want to thank him for all his work he's done, and I also want to pay tribute to my right honourable friend, the member for Ashton-under-Lyne, for piloting this momentous legislation through the House. And if I may, I would also like to add my own thanks to the noble Baroness Taylor of Stevenage, who has been a Doughty champion in the other place, and of course is a Doughty champion in my own constituency. Because in my own constituency of Stevenage, we have 7,000 households that rent privately. They fear that their tenancies coming to an end for no good reason. Only last weekend, I was knocking on doors in our ward of Roebuck, and a young mother opened the door, and I noticed that next to the front door was a window that was broken and it was patched up with a wooden board. And I said, "Oh, is this the council?" "No, I rent privately." And he's a good landlord. Oh, okay, so he's going to fix that window. "Oh, no, he's just giving me a bit of wood, but I'm a bit worried that if I do ask, that he's going to throw me out." So that's what a good landlord is assumed to be. So this has to come to an end. Renters like that young mother have been waiting 40 years for this. Today, should this House agree, this bill will go for royal assent and that fear will come to an end. So I support this motion and I thank the Minister again.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson, give your name off.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I want to start by looking forward to Parliament finally passing legislation that will bring long overdue protections to tenants. We don't, as some Conservatives say, believe that tenants' rights are all well and good. They are not all well and good. No-fault evictions are not all well and good. And the failure to outlaw those by the previous government is unacceptable, and it's a good thing that today this legislation will change that, finally change that. Liberal Democrats have stood in a manifesto and campaigned for ending no-fault evictions of tenants, longer and more stable tenancies, register of landlords and decent homes for our forces families. And now in this bill, and on the MOD service family accommodation, thanks to the government agreeing to our proposal, all of these things are to become law. For too long, renters across the board have had a bad deal. It's time to redress that balance after years of the Conservative government failing to deliver both on no-fault evictions and on decent homes for our military families. I therefore warmly welcome the government's amendments 39, which give effect to making service family accommodation subject to the decent home standard. I'm glad that ministers listen to our Liberal Democrat calls to do so and to service families. I'd also like to thank the Minister for his pragmatically doing the hard yards in negotiating on this bill, and I'd also like to pay tribute to my noble friends, Baronesses Granda and Thornhill in the other place, for the work they have done to secure this important change. The state of housing they've had to endure has been a disgrace. The Defence Select Committee heard of dire conditions, pest infestations, black mould, damp, flooding, unreliable heating and hot water in the winter. Personally, I've heard similar stories and seen photographs from constituents I've been supporting. Service families who are forced to live in damp, mouldy accommodation declared unfit for human habitation. Our soldiers, sailors, Air Force, Royal Marines, like those who serve in 40 Commando Norton Manor Camp in my constituency, the closure of which by the Conservatives I began a campaign against in 2017, they sacrifice huge amounts for our country, and they deserve, at the very least, a decent home for them and their family. And this is not an isolated issue, Madam Deputy Speaker. Research we obtained earlier this year found that on VE Day alone, more than 400 service families were forced to apply for emergency repairs. While the country celebrated our veterans, too many forces families were struggling with housing that fell far short of the standards we rightly expect elsewhere. their new decent home standard, a year after my honourable friend, member for North Shropshire, tried and failed to get the Conservative government to deliver it. And 18 years after Sir Min Campbell began the Lib Dems campaign for decent homes for our military, is a matter of fairness, which I hope will be agreed across the House as a whole. But as a great first step, and one I'm proud the Liberal Democrats have had a hand in securing, decent homes for service families should not just be reported on, but they need to be acted upon. Defence ministers have assured the House that these housing standards are on an upward trajectory, and we will hold government to account on that. And can I ask the Minister to give any assurances he can that the resources will be put in place to ensure that that happens. Nobody wants to see an annual report that leads to no progress. And can we also ask the Minister to ensure that service family accommodation meets the commitments made in the Defence Infrastructure Organisation's Consumer Charter, most notably requirements to complete urgent repairs within a timeline consistent with Arab's law? And can ministers also give that assurance? That would ensure that Lord's Amendment 39 strengthens a bill that already delivers vital reforms to renters.